I think there was a reciprocal part of the deal where AT&T is going to support more of the MVNO stuff, more of the boost stuff, I think. Yeah. But I don't see, there's a direction of travel here. I don't see how you start down this road and don't end up, and why would you hold on to any spectrum?
Well, I know.
So this feels like an incremental.
Why, when everybody's been complaining that your network's not been widely enough deployed and you've been working to targets to get it more widely deployed, would you sort of go, well, we're going to take some of it out, but leave a bit there to do what? What's the? I don't. Yeah.
Well, that. Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast, yet another bonus summer one, because poor old Pierre is not in Venezuela. As a consequence, we were going to try, thinking we weren't going to be able to do these, we're going to try and squeeze one in early next week, but now we're not going to bother because we've done all these, and we're going to skip next week because Ian and I are going to be in Finland with Nokia.
Unless it gets cancelled.
Unless it gets cancelled.
But it shouldn't.
I don't think there's any sign that it's going to get cancelled.
No, I don't need them. Just
why say things like that then?
Well, okay. Well, if I say it won't happen.
Now it's in the ether now.
Yeah, now we're going to have Nokia going, why are you telling us we're about to cancel our thing?
Basically writes off 2 days of travel.
It is, because we're going to a place in like more northern Finland called Oulu, which is their HQ or one of their HQs.
Yeah, their R&D centre.
That's right, yeah. And so you have to go to, I missed the last, you went to Oulu before and I was going to go.
Yeah.
And then my dad died. So I sort of went, I'm going to have to deal with this instead.
Yeah.
But you basically have to go to Helsinki and then hang around in Helsinki for a bit and then get a little flight up to Oulu, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's like, you add up those flights, it's like 5 hours.
Hydroplane?
And then it's a 2-hour time difference. So it basically writes off the day, really.
I'm going to have a challenging week next week because Andrew's on holiday.
Good timing.
Yeah, and so is our meter for most of the week. So even if I wasn't travelling, I would have had my hands full next week. And now I've got to find some way of like putting up stories, sending a newsletter, all that stuff when I'm travelling and the rest of my team are on holiday. So wish me luck. You might not get much conversation out of me at the airport. I'll be sitting there staring at my laptop trying to get stuff out.
Okay, fair enough.
That's what us hard-working journalists have to do. We have to multitask.
Yeah. You do a story on the flight. The plane...
It's about a 3-hour flight to Helsinki, isn't it?
Yeah, and if I remember rightly, and looking at the seating map, which I've already done because I'm super organised like that, the plane that takes you to Helsinki is not the kind of plane that you would expect to take you to Helsinki.
It's a bigger one, isn't it?
It's like a
big
jumbo.
Airbus.
It's like a transatlantic plane. And it was empty last time. There was like no one on it except for Gareth and me and like 2 other people. It's quite weird. So if it's anything like that, you can spread out and basically just write something. And I think there's even like movies and stuff. It's just quite weird that you're going to Helsinki and there's like in-flight entertainment.
Do they give us some like herrings and stuff to eat on the flight?
Probably, yeah. Excellent. Roll mops, whatever they call them. That's like Swedish, isn't it?
I was going to say that's Swedish.
Yeah, but just that part of the world, they love a herring. There's obviously herrings are a big thing in like the Baltic Sea or something.
I used to love it when I was a kid. I used to love it.
Roll mops.
What they really love in Oulu is reindeer.
That's it, yeah.
That's pretty much all I ate last time.
Because I remember before I thought I was going to go, I was checking out, they told us where we were going to have dinner, and it was all reindeer and
if it's the same hotel as last time, it's quite a nice hotel.
Excellent.
And they had a decent restaurant there. So.
And you had some cheeky whiskies, I seem to remember.
No, that gin and grapefruit juice thing, yeah.
Oh, yeah, long drink.
The cheeky whiskies might depend on whether there are certain guys there from Nokia on the
fair
side,
enough.
which might not happen. And it might be a bigger entourage this time. I don't know if it's going to be quite as...
Yeah, because a person we've been trying to get on the pod almost eternally is a relatively new colleague of ours called Joe O'Halloran. He's a new colleague because of the merger between Informa Tech and Tech Target.
He's in nowhere new though, is he, Joe?
He's certainly not. He's not new himself. He's a veteran.
He's a veteran of the industry.
And he works for Computer Weekly, and he's like their telecoms guy on Computer Weekly. So we know him from being at press events together, and we thought, fucking hell, we're colleagues now. We've got to get you on. And I think he screwed the first one up, and then we've screwed it up about 3 times subsequently.
Yeah.
Anyway, apparently he's going to be on this thing as well. I was hoping we might be able to do one immediately after where the 3 of us could compare notes, but he's such a busy, high-flying journalist that he's off somewhere else the next week.
He's off to Sweden.
Germany, I think.
Oh, God.
Anyway, so I suppose that counts as the opening bollocks, doesn't it? I haven't been up to much. Have you?
It was bank holiday.
That's right.
Wandered
so
around.
We've had a shorter week. I did a barbecue.
Yeah, I was going to go out. I won't say to what because
Right, yeah.
I was supposed to go to a sort of PRD, but I couldn't make it in the end. So
okay.
Yeah, but that was unfortunate because it could have been fun.
Well.
Few free drinks and everything,
Yeah, I wasn't tempted because we're going. We should give her a shout out. We're going out to see off our lovely colleague Hannah, who's leaving after 10 years, and she's having her leaving do immediately after the pod.
Yeah, 11 years, I think.
Right. Okay. So cheers, Hannah. We'll miss you.
No, Hannah's been there 9 years.
Oh, all right. Something like that.
Let's meet in the middle.
Between 9 and 11.
I tell you what. Let's argue a toss over that number.
I know, it was 2016 when she joined.
Oh yeah, you were mentioned in her outgoing email, weren't you?
Yeah.
As the first person she met.
Yeah.
So when Informer bought Light Reading, she'd only just joined then.
Yeah, like months before. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, we're going to be doing that. So yeah, I'll stop waffling on because the more I bang on, the more we're eating into hanging out with Hannah time.
Yeah.
So I think easily the biggest telecom story of the week this week, which came kind of out of the blue, was a US company called EchoStar, which among its holdings
goes by other names.
Right. Well, among its holdings, I'm never quite sure because it's all owned by this guy called Charlie Ergen, is it? Mm-hmm. But it owns Dish, which is like a new MNO.
Yeah, other things.
Yeah, among other things. Anyway, and it had been struggling a little bit, and there's it was a big greenfield Open RAN pioneer on which we're going to have a deep dive.
Also, confusingly, has a brand called Boost Mobile.
That's right, which is an MVNO, is it?
Which is a MVNO, but I think, I'm not entirely sure on this, but I think some of the Dish network services that are actually on its own network are being provided under the Boost Mobile brand. So.
And there's some kind of like cable TV bits and bobs.
All sorts.
Yeah, anyway, the long and short of it is this company EchoStar just suddenly announced it was flogging a shitload of spectrum that it owned to AT&T for, what was it, 22 billion? Something
23
like that?
billion.
23 billion. And that kind of came out of the blue, and we're gonna talk about that, not just for the news on the face of it, but the kind of ripples that have emanated from that news and how they affect lots of other telecoms-y things.
And look at you. What does this all mean? You should be doing an A-level on it, Scott.
Hey, we're well above A-level.
Yeah.
This is high-level analysis you get on this podcast. So we're going to get into that. Then I think we're going to talk a bit of Huawei, because you've written a couple of stories about them this week, and it's always a nicer, tasty topic.
Yep.
Chiefly to do with either where they're allowed or not allowed to be, and whether or not
it's working.
Yeah, and whether or not they can get hold of like Nvidia chips or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's always some fun going on there, and actually a couple of major news publications have written about their first half numbers, which we don't have as a primary source because I think they derived them from Chinese stock exchange listings.
Yeah, as I understand it, they have to file something in China.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
but we might still refer to that because it says some interesting stuff about their R&D spend, which is consistent with some of the stuff that might be going on in the more geopolitical US versus China.
I don't even know what those figures are, to be honest with you.
No, well,
so you can surprise me on the pod.
Yeah, okay, I will. And then we might finish off with like a Scott Pacino self-indulgent bit where I'm going to look at a couple of stories I've written this week about the UK trying to exert its influence on the internet and on US companies, and these US companies telling the UK to fuck off. And you know, we're playing with fire there because if Trump spots some of that stuff, he's bound to throw his toys out the pram and then just start going, right, 100% tariffs.
Yep.
That'll fucking learn, yeah? Or something like that. So we'll finish off on that.
Do you know what? I might be able to bring my Nvidia into that thing a little bit. Because his, I think there's a connection between some of his ranting on Tree Social recently and some of the Nvidia AI rant stuff.
Jolly good.
It's very yeah, it's an awkward link, but
okay. Well, don't worry.
You can just about draw it.
Well, it's towards the end. By then, we should be loose enough to make that link fairly seamless. Who was I chatting to? I was chatting to someone else who listens to the pod, and I said they've only got halfway through, and I said, you should make sure you get to the end because that's when we're most relaxed.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start. So I've teed up EchoStar. I might just talk about like the top line coverage of it a bit more before I get you to sort of talk about your angle.
I think you should talk about some of the spectrum stuff, because I didn't sort of delve into that too much anyway.
Okay.
Because
well, I mean, other to be honest, other colleagues of yours on Light Reading have covered it very well. But you know, since you're passing the ball to me, I'll refer to our own.
Yeah.
The
political side of it's quite interesting as well. You know, as you were saying, the kind of interference that came from none other than the US Commander in Chief.
Yes, well, that was my angle. And where is it? There we are, selling spectrum. Okay. So Mary covered this for us, I believe. Yeah. And so her headline is EchoStar to take apart RAN after 23 billion spectrum deal with AT&T. And yeah. And so spectrum is an enormously valuable thing. We all know about those auctions and how people bid through the arse to get hold of this spectrum. And it's arguably even more than like the RAN estate, the most powerful, the most valuable asset that mobile operators own, isn't it?
Yes.
I think it's a little bit weird.
It's where a lot of the investment goes.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit weird given that they're licenses, that they're transferable in that way, but there we go. It seems they are. And an EchoStar, which is the holding company of things like Dish and Boost and all that, it's been having a nightmare for a little while. It's one of those companies that in its filings, in the risk bits, it always goes, look, we've got a bunch of debt that's about to mature and we haven't got the fucking cash to pay it off. And so, you know,
turns out it's quite expensive to build a mobile network and apply the spectrum for it.
And I think they're in debt for lots of other just random corporate reasons. I think this geezer, you know, I don't want to characterise him because I don't know much about him, and B, I don't want him to sue me, but it's Charlie Ergen. It looks like he's one of those more buccaneering sort of like capitalist
Sounds
types.
like a cowboy. Sounds like a cowboy, Scott.
Could be. But I mean that in only the nicest way. So his company's in loads of debt. And it wasn't obvious what he was going to do about it, because they bet a hell of a lot on creating this fourth mobile operator in the US called Dish. And Dish has done a lot of really interesting stuff. It went really big on Open RAN, because this is what things like Dish and Rakuten in Japan can do. When you're a greenfield operator and you haven't got all this legacy shit to deal with, you know, and you're just starting from scratch in effect, then they, you know, the two of them and one or two others, is it 1&1 in Germany?
Yeah.
Have decided, then fuck it, if we're starting from scratch, we'll go with Open RAN because that's the latest, greatest.
Yeah, there's only three of them.
Technological paradigm. Okay, so I've covered them.
There's only, I mean, this is a problem with the greenfield market, is that there isn't really a greenfield market. And this is something, I mean, we'll go back to spectrum stuff, but just as an aside, for my story, I spoke with Mavenir's CEO, Pardeep Kohli.
Yeah,
why is he involved in this? Because Mavenir is one of their main vendors, basically.
Yeah, and they're a big Open RAN vendor.
Yeah, and so this obviously has an effect on them. But he was sort of saying, I mean, he's quite upfront when you chat to him these days, and he was kind of saying that, you know, it really needed to go a lot further than Dish if it was going to be transformative for us. It wasn't really good enough for it just to be a Dish thing.
No,
and the market's just a brownfield market. You know, we don't really see network operators coming from nowhere and building one from scratch.
When we go on a deeper dive in that, I'm sure you'll have comments to be made about Ericsson and AT&T's supposed Open RAN and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so they were having a bit of a nightmare. And then, so cut a long story short, and I'll also give a bit of background. I'll sort of get my stuff out of my system and then largely pass the ball over to you. And, you know, there's statements like, you know, AT&T is obviously happy because they got hold of, it's basically a chunk of mid-band, which is the 3.45 gigahertz spectrum band.
And there's 600, isn't there? Is the other one? Is that
the other one's at 600? And you know, for people who don't know, the lower frequency, of which 600 is about the lowest that's used for telecoms, isn't it? The lower it is, the better the propagation characteristics. In other words, the longer the range from the radio mast, and the better it is at penetrating walls. Yeah. So the low frequency stuff is fucking priceless.
Yeah.
Whereas this mid-band stuff, you know, it's quite handy, especially for like sort of massive MIMO and some of the 5G bits and bobs. But that 200 megahertz of 600 megahertz frequency is very valuable. I would assume accounted for the majority of the 23
but the pipe's
billion.
fatter, isn't it? So you can get more bandwidth, basically. There's more spectrum in the mid-band than
exactly. So it's intrinsically inferior spectrum, but there's more of it.
Yeah.
But they only got 30 megahertz of the mid-band, and they got 20 megahertz of the low band.
Inferior, yeah. I mean, it's always perceived to be inferior, and it never sells as high in auctions.
Because of the propagation characteristics.
Because of the propagation, but in defence of mid-band and even higher band spectrum, and I know you would bring up the point about millimetre wave, you have to be set on the base station, but you do get, if you're going to be using it in the way that Qualcomm says you should use millimetre wave, which is stick a mast in a stadium, you get these super
or
high
an airport or a shopping mall.
You get these super high connectivity speeds that you wouldn't be able to do with putting a 600
because of the fatter pipe
megahertz one.
Totally.
So there is a trade-off.
It has its uses.
Yeah, I mean, someone like Earl Lum, who's an analyst that we've quoted a few times on the show, I think, thinks that whenever I've talked to him about spectrum and the mechanics of it and the boxes and all that, he's quite sort of cynical about the use of low band spectrum for 5G at all. He says it almost shouldn't be allowed because you go and provide a 5G service over 600 megahertz, and you really aren't getting anything.
Well, I'm with Earl on that. There was, I don't think it was Earl's study that I remember writing about years ago, but there was a study when I think it's T-Mobile US started doing 5G over 600 megahertz, and they compared it to 4G over 600 megahertz, and there was no fucking difference.
Yeah.
So it was 5G in name only.
So like Boy Eckert, the CEO of Ericsson, was saying that there's a lot of talk about standalone at the moment. We had Gabriel Brown on from Heavy Reading / Omdia recently, kind of chatting
brackets
about
Omdia,
whatever. and he Boy Eckert, when he was on the last earnings call, was talking about it, and he was saying there's two things you need for standalone. One is the new core, but you also need a lot of mid-band radios to be rolled out, because you want this kind of seamless coverage that's a proper 5G service, because you don't want to provide something that there's a perception it's actually worse than you were getting on 4G. Obviously he's going to say that because he wants to sell more expensive radios.
But he's also right.
But he's also kind of right.
Well, I mean, the long and short of it is, if you were trying to cover, I don't know, let's pick a random land area, 100 square miles of land, with mid-band versus low-band, I'm going to guess you'd need about 10 times as many base stations or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know what the numbers are, but you need more.
But you'd need an order of magnitude more base stations.
A more densified grid, I think, is the approved terminology in the industry.
Yeah, we'll have someone, I mean, occasionally some people, especially that bloke from Huawei Canada, he's always commenting on LinkedIn with really helpful insight.
He was.
So maybe if you hear that, I forgot his name.
Is it Michael?
Yeah, that'll do.
Well,
Dave from Huawei Canada.
His name's Michael. He was pinging me this week, actually.
Right, okay.
But he's probably done the same with you. But yeah, he seems like a really nice chap.
If you've got any comments, I'll try and remember them. In fact, I'll look at. That's a good point on LinkedIn. That some people said some nice things about last week's pod. I'm going to look that up. So
his name's Michael Roger.
Michael Roger. All right. Yeah. Sorry, Dave.
If you want to remember it, you can remember it because his surname's the same as one of the Canadian carriers.
There we go.
Yeah. See, I did that sort of memory palace.
I wonder if he knows someone called Roger Michael. That'll be fun. I need to find some people who said some nice things, including him. Anyway, Michael, if you've got any thoughts about how many more base stations, the ratio of base stations you need to cover the same area between typical mid-band and typical low-band, that would be interesting. Anyway, let's get back to all that. So they sold them all this really valuable spectrum, and so that's great for...
Can I just ask?
Yeah, go on.
Did they pretty much sell all of their 600 megahertz and 3.5 gigahertz spectrum? And what spectrum do they actually have left after this? Because I didn't go into that because I just thought I'm going to leave.
When I was reading around it, I don't think I covered it in anything I wrote. But when I was reading around it, I think there's still quite a lot more.
Yeah. In
fact, I think some of your colleagues might have detailed that.
Well, I know Jeff Baumgartner wrote quite a lot on it.
He wrote a good one, and then you had a guest post that I linked to. That was quite good.
That's Roger Entner, possibly, because we're getting some analyst stuff coming in that's going up on Light Reading at the moment through a little arrangement we have with them. So,
right. Yeah. No, that's good. In fact, I linked to that one. Yeah. He said the end of the fourth carrier experiment. And that was Roger Entner, as you say. And I thought that was really good.
His name right, because I fucked it up.
There's lots of it's quite a fact-heavy piece that he wrote, so it's really useful.
It's good to have facts in news stories.
It helps. I mean, personally, I just prefer to pull opinions out of my arse. It's just easier. But there we go. Each to their own. Yeah, I think somewhere in it, I'm trying to scroll in real time while I'm talking. I think somewhere in it there's a mention of what they still got left. I think they still got a decent amount left, like maybe the same value again at least.
So, because I'm curious, and we're going to get onto this, so I won't go into it now, but obviously a part of the announcement was pretty much getting out of the MNO business and just being an MVNO.
Well, they're talking about being a hybrid operator, which seems like
I
fudge.
think that sort of stuff is a fudge, because I think what they're doing is it's like not going to be overnight, but they're pretty much talking about, I noticed they also said elements of the radio access network will be decommissioned, which could mean all of it, or it could mean some of it. But it probably means all of it. I don't see why you'd pull out of. I don't see.
Well, I mean, but that's back to your story. Why would AT&T, when it's invested so heavily in Ericsson, maintain these other bits that have?
Yeah, and it's been widely interpreted, by the way, by all the press, pretty much, that they're kind of getting out completely. And I haven't seen any pushback on that from EchoStar itself. So my question is, is this other spectrum going to get flogged?
Well, I've just found the bit from Roger Entner's bit on light reading.
Right.
I'll read it verbatim.
Which I should know as it's on light reading.
Yeah, well, don't worry.
Yeah.
Well, you see, I have to read light reading to get up to speed. When I wrote my bit, I got to admit, Mary had covered it for us, and I just thought, oh shit, I don't really know what the fuck's going on here. So I did a lot of reading, and it just so happened that a good part of it was on your site. So this is what he writes. EchoStar's remaining portfolio also includes licenses for 700 megahertz. I hate this. AWS3, H-Block, CBRS, C-band. 5 different ways of referring to the fucking spectrum. It does my head in.
Yeah, see, I get confused.
And that's not Roger's fault. That's just what they
American terminology for, why can't you just say what the frequency is?
AWS makes me think of Amazon.
Yeah, I know.
H-Block makes me think of a prison.
Yeah.
CBRS makes me think of CB radio. I screwed that one up once on a podcast, didn't I? And then the C band. And various millimeter wave frequencies. So in other words, they've still got a lot,
right?
According to Roger. And that 700 megahertz alone will be worth a decent amount.
Did Roger in his blog have anything to say about what they might be doing with all of that?
Okay, let's have a look. People like Verizon and T-Mobile won't be sniffing around it, which is
interesting.
Which is another angle that I want to explore as well.
Yeah. So we could see more spectrum being sold by EchoStar potentially to people other than AT&T.
Well, I think that to cut to the chase on this, I mean, it seems clear that even though they've only sold part of their spectrum and become a hybrid network, like somewhere between an MNO and MVNO, I don't see how you're either one or the other, surely.
Yeah.
Because I think there was a reciprocal part of the deal where AT&T is going to support more of the MVNO stuff, more of the boost stuff, I think. Yeah. But I don't see, there's a direction of travel here. I don't see how you start down this road and don't end up. And why would you hold on to any spectrum?
Well, I know.
So this feels like an incremental.
Why, when everybody's been complaining that your network's not been widely enough deployed and you've been working to targets to get it more widely deployed, would you sort of go, well, we're going to take some of it out, but leave a bit there to do what? What's the? I don't. Yeah.
Well, that gets us back to my angle. So that was Mary's coverage, which just covered the essential facts of it, and as you said, Jeff did a great job of doing that for you, and followed up by this chap Roger. And then I wrote a couple of days ago. I've always said on the pod that I'm the one who, when everyone else picks all the low hanging fruit, and I have to find something to write.
Yeah. And
this one, it was very much just an opinion led piece. I wasn't really saying anything new. I was just putting a new angle on it. And my angle was EchoStar AT&T Spectrum deal has Trump written all over it. And I've even, for my featured picture, I've got Trump's weird little zigzaggy
That's you
signature.
Craning your long giraffe neck up to the fruit right at the top of the tree.
That's right, yeah, and doing some fucking amazing analysis.
And what has Trump got to do with this? Then?
Okay, well, so I'll try and distill it.
Can I have one of yours?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, of course. So back in November last year, no, I think it might have been just before that. Yeah, it was before the general election just last year, but not much before it. There had been the FCC, which is the American comms regulator, had been saying to EchoStar and Dish that they've got all this spectrum, and a condition of the license is they fucking use it. They've been kind of sitting on it, and a lot of it hadn't been used, and you'd have people like Elon Musk bitching, saying we could use that for Starlink and all that sort of thing.
That hasn't happened so far, has it?
No. Well, yeah, everything Elon Musk says.
I wonder what he thinks of the AT&T deal. He's probably thinking, I wanted to get my hands on some of that. I'm pretty sure, actually, that Starlink, not him directly, but Starlink was writing to the FCC, sort of asking to have it.
And it could be that if he hadn't started calling Trump a nonce on social media,
they'd have gone to him
that he might have got it. Yeah. So there we are. These things have their downsides.
Yeah, John Stankey's AT&T's feeling happy about the
You just keep gobbing off, Elon. That suits me just fine. And they were under pressure for about now, the summer of this year. They'd got to have reached certain coverage thresholds that they were nowhere near, something like 75% of the country or whatever.
80%, I think.
Right. Yeah. And they were nowhere near it. And then they went, can you give us 18 months more? And the FCC under the Biden presidency went, go on then. Yeah. And so it gave until the end of 26 or something like that. And then, but then 5 months into this presidency, there's a new head of the FCC. Obviously, every public agency is politicized in the States. So when you get a new sheriff in town, you get new people in charge of the FCC and that sort of thing. And what's the geezer's name now?
At the FCC, Brendan Carr.
Brendan Carr, that's it.
Yeah, he's Musk's mate, isn't he?
Is he? Well,
I don't know if he is anymore, but the two
in this
used to be like that.
Well, I think as we've realised with Musk and Trump, no one's mates for long at the top table, are they? Anyway, the FCC wrote to Charlie Ergen, the head of EchoStar, saying, we reckon, again, I'm obviously paraphrasing, we reckon that decision to give you a deadline extension was bullshit. And we might just fucking reverse it.
Yeah.
And this is, which would have given them about a month to sort of cover half the country. Obviously not doable. And basically what I said was that letter, whether or not they would have followed through on it is debatable, but that letter is a classic Trump negotiating chip where you initiate with something very aggressive, like existentially threatening in this case, and then you negotiate from that incredibly strong position where the people will do anything just to not be fucking obliterated.
Yeah, I think some of the coverage stuff's a bit spurious, by the way that they've measured coverage.
Yeah, well, that's quite contentious, isn't it?
It's very contentious. And by the way, the previous administration, the Biden administration, if you look at the SEC filings that EchoStar was publishing when that was in power, they were at 70% coverage, yeah? And they were acknowledged to have reached 70% coverage targets. They were acknowledged to have reached 70% coverage targets back when I even spoke with Mark Ruan, who was the guy who was pretty much in charge of their whole technology strategy.
Well, that I didn't know. I'd got the impression, and maybe I've been reading those stories that you're talking about, that they were still quite far off.
No, and then it was raised from that 70%. Then the next one. Then there's the next one to go to 80%.
And of course, each new increment is harder because you're going more in the back of the
Yeah, but I think some of these. I've looked at the Brendan Carr letters that were being sent out in April, and there's sort of thinly veiled accusations and threats in it. It's like the implication is you haven't reached these targets, but there's nothing actually saying concretely that you haven't and that you're at this.
Okay.
And there's no real data in it. I remember some of my colleagues looking at this. I think Mike Dana, who now works at Ookla. I
know, and who you quoted in a story.
I did.
As Ookla analyst, I put on LinkedIn. I'm still getting used to that.
I quoted him in a. I didn't speak to Mike about it, but he put up a sort of cheeky little LinkedIn post, which I grabbed and included the link to his LinkedIn post. But I think he'd looked at this as well, at the sort of Dish Network coverage and the criticisms that it wasn't sort of reaching targets. And it's the trouble with measuring coverage is that it's not like an exact science, and it's kind of a hard thing to do. You get these claims that companies come out with, and you see it in countries outside the US, where it's 70% population coverage, and someone else puts it at a different level, and then you have an outdoor metric and you have an indoor metric, and it might depend on busy hour traffic statistics and all this sort of thing. So it's quite a hard thing to actually measure anyway. And I think they'd obviously got it in for EchoStar, clearly, the administration.
Yeah.
This is the thing I don't quite get, is what is it
But this is part of my story.
Okay.
This angle.
That's what I'm asking. Why do they have it in for this guy, for Charlie Ergen? And
I think there's two things. The superficial thing is that someone like Brendan Carr or maybe even Elon Musk back when they were mates, has just gone, look, this spectrum's doing fuck all, and that's bad for the country. We want that spectrum being used because then the country's more connected and more productive and more advanced and more switched on.
Right.
So that's the superficial thing.
But they'd sort of, in themselves, kind of taken I mean, I get why Musk would have that line, because he obviously wanted this spectrum for himself, yeah?
Yeah.
And maybe Brendan Carr's just sort of gone along with it because he's Musk's mate. But clearly the previous administration had a much more sympathetic take on this
and
deployment.
That could be another reason, by the way. It could just be adversarial.
We're going to come to this later, but the irony of this, for me, in a way, is that this network was a much more made in America one than the other networks that you've got in the US, arguably.
Well, in fact, it was Mike Dano, talking about Mike Dano, who wrote for Light Reading when he was still there and hadn't defected to Ookla. He wrote a story, FCC
if we ever catch him, we'll shoot him, yeah?
FCC to investigate EchoStar's 5G, and he covered that letter. So I linked to him in my story. And
yeah. I mean, he did really good coverage of all this stuff, Mike. He was all over it. And
totally. And then he's linked to the letter from Carr to Ergen. And he's basically going, what the fuck's going on? The terms of the deal were clear. The FCC structured the build-out obligations to prevent spectrum warehousing and ensure that Americans would gain broader access to high-speed wireless services, including in underserved and rural areas. So you can see the political angle there, especially the underserved angle. And so that's one reason, but another reason that I sort of more speculated about.
Yeah, if you go along with it, if you sort of believe that he is warehousing spectrum, and as I say, I think they'd obviously made their minds up that he has, based on some data that I think is, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that it's very hard to sort of pin down. I mean, they're obviously not going to be where AT&T and Verizon are, out having started building their network in 2020. They needed to be given time to do it. And you had an opportunity there to have a fourth network made partly with American technology because of some of the companies involved, but they'd obviously taken a sort of line against him. It seems it almost seems a bit personal.
They had, and they've probably cherry picked some data. I mean, the letter goes on. I won't bore everyone by reading it out, but he cherry picks some anecdotes of evidence of EchoStar's bad faith in obeying its coverage obligations, but I totally take your point. If you've researched it and you casting doubt about those allegations,
I'm not saying I've researched it deeply,
but you've heard
I've heard things, and as I said, the Biden administration was a lot more sympathetic towards the fact that it's quite hard to build a nationwide network, and seem prepared to give a few deadlines. I mean, this happens in Europe. It's not a new thing. Companies miss targets, and if you're a greenfield, it's a very hard thing to do. And to take it to the point where you're saying you're warehousing spectrum and somehow ripping off the US customer after they've only been at it for a few years, just seems like they got it in for EchoStar, like almost from the outset.
So it could be. And so my more conspiracy theory angle on this is I kind of referred to the coverage I'd done that we've spoken about on the pod about the Intel situation. Yeah, where a senator called Tom Cotton wrote a thing going, this guy Lip-Bu Tan, he sounds a bit Chinese, must be dodgy. Let's look into that. And then Trump blurted out some truth post going, yeah, he's compromised, he needs to resign immediately. And then within a month, this Lip-Bu Tan's over in the White House handing over 10% of his fucking company. Yeah. I don't think you need to be the biggest conspiracy theorist to see that this feels like a massive... the shakedown, I would say.
The art of the deal is basically bully someone, and then they'll
bully someone, threaten them with something existentially. You're basically saying it's either your signature or your brains are going to be on this piece of paper, a la Godfather. Yeah, just send in Luca Brasi and fucking get the deal done, innit? So in the previous case, Luca Brasi was Tom Cotton, and in this case, Luca Brasi was Brendan Carr. In that they're not so much the enforcers. They set up the pretext for him to then make a sort of a very broad threat. So in the case of Intel, it was trying to get the CEO to resign. Yeah. In the case of this, it was saying that we're gonna threaten to revoke your license, which, as we know, they just flogged some of those licenses for 23 billion. They seem to have as much again. So let's say that's a 50 billion license holding. And the FCC has it within its remit to just go, right, we're having them back. Yeah. We're basically rinsing you of $50 billion. That's a lot of power. Yeah. anyway, so that's what they did, and I think. And then the thing that left a bad taste in my mouth about this is what a fait accompli it was. We went from no one knowing anything about it to the deal was done with AT&T.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would be interesting. I was I won't name them, but I was I think it was yesterday. I was messaging someone who has a professional interest in all this stuff, and going, I wonder if anyone at Verizon or T-Mobile US has got the balls to sue about this, because on one level, I mean, if it comes out that they weren't even invited to pitch for this stuff, that's dodgy, isn't it? That's a closed auction. That's it's just a stitch up.
I don't understand. AT&T's obviously emerged as the buyer of this, and I don't understand how. Yeah, like you say, why Verizon and T-Mobile perhaps weren't involved. I'd
like to know more about that.
Yeah, but then again, I don't really know how this stuff works. It's quite an unusual situation, isn't it, for Spectrum suddenly to be taken off some company.
But if they weren't invited to bid, under normal circumstances, I'm sure they'd sue.
I mean, let's imagine in the UK that one of the operators gets into loads of trouble and it's in a position where it needs to sort of basically shut down and become an MVNO and similar thing. You're pretty sure that Ofcom would try and have an auction,
it'd be public.
It would be a public.
It wouldn't just be a done deal like this.
Be like we've decided that BT
exactly.
Goes and buys
That's exactly
this.
my point.
And then the question is, and I think some people have put together some little, those little charts that show how much spectrum people hold. And I love looking at these things in the UK because it's more understandable than it is in the US because it's all regionalised over there and quite confusing.
Oh my God, yeah.
I think you can try and do national charts, and I think someone did something showing what they're like. But I'd be interested to know now where AT&T kind of measures up after this alongside companies like Verizon and T-Mobile.
I think I read somewhere, maybe it was on Light Reading, that they seem to have a bit of a deficiency in mid-band, so it affects that.
Although there's one argument that the problem with both AT&T and Verizon compared with T-Mobile is that T-Mobile was not only using this 600 megahertz itself, but also had this Sprint spectrum that's at 2.5 gigahertz.
Right.
And the difference between 2.5 and 3.6, 3.7, which is the kind of AWS4 band, I think, is quite significant in terms of propagation.
It is,
so
is
to
it?
Get,
right.
Well, this is a guy called Craig Moffett at Moffett-Nathanson, who, and I think T-Mobile itself is sort of, I mean, they would, but they've sort of drawn attention to this, that they think they get sort of better propagation with that. I mean, it's
it stands to reason.
It's 1,000 megahertz difference.
It's a big difference.
It doesn't sound insignificant.
We certainly know the difference between 800 and 1800 is massive.
That's exactly the example I was just going to give. So
Great
surely going up from 2.5 to 3.6, 3.7 is going to make quite a difference. And I do remember seeing some charts in Craig Moffett's report where he'd actually put images, and I don't know where he got them, of cells and like some kind of grid and comparing one operator with the other, and the 2.5 gigahertz, which was obviously based on what T-Mobile's doing, just looked like it was a lot more economical to do.
No, that's totally believable.
If AT&T's only picking up a bunch of extra 3.6, 3.7 with this, then is it not necessarily that much better off? I don't know, but
I think, I mean, all MNOs would love to have a massive fat pipe in the low band. That's just a no-brainer. But it's a scarce commodity.
Yeah.
So they have to make up the difference in mid-band. But anyway, so getting back to my sort of theory on this, that left a bad taste in my mouth. And by the way, just to finish off the thing about whether or not there was a competitive tender, under normal circumstances, you'd expect lawyers from Verizon and T-Mobile US to get involved and go, what the fuck?
But no.
But I don't think they will because of what Trump's like. He can be incredibly vindictive and take things incredibly personally. And if they started moaning, he'd be like, "Oh, we're playing that game, are we?"
It's a great setup, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really, it's really democratic and accountable.
Yeah.
So I don't think they will, but I think that's bad because basically the long and short of it is you got Trump yet again putting his finger on the scales in the private sector and making shit happen in a completely opaque and unaccountable way. But then, as I said in my piece, it's not necessarily a bad outcome for EchoStar because they were struggling, and their debts were about 20 or 30 billion.
Yeah. So here's the thing that I would throw into this as a caveat for all that you've said, and I'm not saying I disagree with it, and I think obviously Trump was a huge factor, and there's loads of evidence pointing to that with all the Brendan Carr and Musk shenanigans earlier in the year. I remember our good friend and colleague Gabriel Brown speculating about the likelihood of a Dish Spectrum sale around about this time last year.
Oh, right. Well, fair play to you, Gabriel.
For a long time, people have been saying its losses and its debts and its financial position.
Yeah, it's just not sustainable.
It's going to have to quit the game at some point. And it's either going to have some great moment that comes along where it's a bit like Rakuten in Japan, yeah? I mean, but worse. Yeah. Rakuten now, I think, is sort of claiming it's broken even.
Well, at least Rakuten's got all its other stuff that it's
got all of its other stuff.
Subsidised.
Dish has other stuff, but it's so if you look at if you look at the losses of its wireless business, which I did, they're like over 5 billion for the last two.
Dish.
Dish's wireless business.
Yeah.
They come to about 5 billion for if you add them up for 2023 and 2024.
2.5 a year.
On revenues of something like 7 billion. So it's
right.
So it's a big loss. It's like and it's but then it's not as bad at group level because it's got all of its other interests.
Yeah.
And you
expect a new entrant to be very capex intensive initially.
Yeah, and you expect it to be loss making initially. But I think it had got to the point where it was so tough to do this. I mean, the figures I got, by the way, we're talking about those coverage statistics, what it means in terms of site numbers. I think the FCC had said a couple of years ago that they'd reached, maybe it wasn't quite 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, but they'd reached they've got 15,000 sites deployed and were sort of claiming about 70% population coverage with that. Doesn't sound very much in a country like the US.
It doesn't, does it?
But you're
15,000 to cover.
Yeah, but you think about the topography, like the population density distribution in the US. They're putting it in Dallas. They're putting it in big cities, and then the hard job is the other 30%.
Yeah.
When I spoke with Pardeep Kohli, Mavenir's CEO, on earlier this week, he was saying they're at about 25,000 sites, which is still not. I mean, it's still nowhere near what the footprints of companies like Verizon and AT&T are. You're talking. I don't even know what the latest figures are, but I think you're talking sort of 80, 90,000 sites with those companies. By the way, it's massively less in a country the US's size. You compare it with how many sites China's deployed. They have ridiculous numbers of sites. I mean, I know they might measure this differently, and sometimes they're probably including what we call small cells in the figure, but they still seem to have and it's a bigger population obviously anyway, but they still seem to have if you measure this stuff on a kind of how many sites you've got per capita sort of thing, which it's hard to do, but you can sort of aggregate numbers of people up to get some metrics that you can measure. China just has so many more sites on a kind of, for its population than the US does. But 25,000 sites is still not very much. And they were cutting capex quite sharply at the wireless business. Because obviously trying to sort of deal with this problem, like you were saying, of debt.
Well, and that could have been another reason why the FCC and Trump decided to intervene, is that they extrapolated that and thought these fuckers are never going to
And they hadn't
deliver.
got very many customers. Like the Boost mobile business, this is a big problem. This is a problem that Rakuten's had in Japan, is that it's... because we were going to talk about the ramifications for other bits of the world, but it's quite interesting to compare the greenfield...
Or even the ranifications.
The ranification. I like that.
Hello.
Yes. But you look at Rakuten in Japan and what it's been able to do with its rollout, which is much more extensive than Dish's, but has its problems. And has had its problems, some of which have been resolved. But they've still only got, I think they're at sort of 8-9 million customers in a market where there's 125 million people. And people tend to have more than one subscription in Japan as well. Like you look at penetration, it's very high. So they're just about breaking even on the telecom business, I think they're saying.
In Brendan Carr's letter to Ergen in May, one of his paragraphs ends, "Today, there are fewer Boost Mobile subscribers than when EchoStar acquired the company 5 years ago."
There you are.
So that's one of the sticks he was using to beat him with.
And a lot of those are the sort of MVNO aspect of the deal, where they're not actually half the time, they're not actually on Dish's network.
Because it's all prepaid. They're chopping and changing.
Well, I mean, I'm saying if you're a Boost Mobile customer,
I see. Yeah,
you're not actually on the network that Dish has built. Yeah. You go off somewhere and you're on the AT&T, which is what's going to happen. They're going to become an AT&T MVNO exclusive. Pretty much, I think is where it's going to go.
Let me wrap up my take on it, because it naturally leads into, we've touched on your take, but we'll do it fully. So I asked some questions at the end of it, so I was a bit like, this all feels a bit fucking murky. Trump poking his nose in like this. And then I said, it poses some questions, one of which I covered about the tender process. How come AT&T just seemed to get this out of the blue? You can just imagine just Trump in an office with, was it Stanky? Is he the guy in charge of AT&T?
Yeah,
with Stanky and
Stanky
Ergen.
particularly close?
Well, I don't know, but Trump's close to anyone he decides to be close to, isn't he?
Well, Stanky
he just brings people into his office and has a word.
I did listen to the last AT&T earnings call with Stanky on it, which I don't normally do, but we have a bit of a gap on US coverage side at the moment, as people know, with Mike Dana moving to Ookla, which will hopefully be resolved soon.
Okay,
but
watch this space.
But he was sort of, oh God, I hate this expression and I'm going to use it anyway. He was kind of blowing smoke up the administration's arse.
Didn't we look that up live on the pod once?
Yeah. It's an actual thing. Yeah. It used to be.
And like just saying wonderful things about the whole tax policy. That what is it?
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Well, there we are. You see, the plot thickens.
Yeah.
So he's getting chummy. Yeah. He's buttering him up to make sure this deal went through.
Buttering him up.
And
giving it large.
That's another one. Yeah. I use all these little metaphors. I've got no idea what their provenance is. And so there was that. And
then favour.
And then the other angle I picked on, which was what your guest poster, what's his name? I keep forgetting his name.
Roger Entner.
Yeah, Roger, yeah. Which he touched on, which is this fourth player thing. And, it seems to be another anecdotal example of how fucking difficult it is to be a fourth player in a national market, a fourth MNO. But then the final angle I picked on, this is what's queuing you up, is I was like, what does this mean for Open RAN? Because Dish was an Open RAN champion, and you just been chatting to, this seems to be yet another example of where Mavenir, having decided to go all in on Open RAN, and I haven't had this confirmed from anyone at Mavenir, but my assertion still is that one of the reasons they went so hard on it is they will have got a lot of fucking favourable prodding from the US state. And I think one of the reasons they pulled out, as I speculated when we chatted about their big refinancing thing and then pulling out of Open RAN, I think they would have just thought, oh, fuck, a lot of the promises we got off the government haven't come through.
I can answer that question.
Well, let me finish and then I'll totally cede the floor to you. This seems like yet another example of the US state retreating from Open RAN, because otherwise they could have tried to support Dish more or done something like that. Instead, they seem to have encouraged them to exit it. Anyway, over to you, mate.
Well, I mean, I'm glad you just put it that way, because you give me an idea for something to write next week before I go to Finland.
That often happens on the
pod. And also, I wasn't as direct on that question when I spoke with Pardeep about the Dish deployment, because I was more sort of interested in the nitty-gritty of what they're doing and how he sort of sees that, like, an exit sort of affecting them. But the question about Mavenir getting the sort of message that the US isn't really going to go behind this, I think completely comes through in comments that Pardeep's made to me in the last few times I've spoken to him.
There we go.
Because he often complains.
And he's got a lot more talkative since
he's very
he made
talkative,
that move,
but I think one of his points that he keeps bringing up when I talk to him and he keeps making is that it's very hard to compete against a Huawei that's getting he pretty much has said this on the record, and it's an accusation that's been levelled at them a lot, I know, but a Huawei that's essentially being bankrolled by the Chinese state is a perception in the West, among Western critics.
Which Huawei would push back on, obviously. But
even that Ericsson and Nokia get kind of state support in a way that the US hasn't provided for Open RAN.
Right.
Those are comments that he's basically made.
Well, careful what you wish for. Intel's got state support now and it's had to give up.
Yeah, but I think he would obviously, and it's like a Faustian pact, isn't it, kind of thing. But I think some of the Open RAN companies, Mavenir among them, would probably have liked the idea, just as someone like Intel welcomed the whole CHIPS Act stuff, because it's like, well, we can get some money and go and throw it into semiconductor fabs.
Yeah,
they'd like the idea, I'm sure, of the US state coming along and going, here's 20 billion for you guys to invest in Open RAN stuff. And by the way, we're going to sort of lean on the operators.
Yeah, they could have doubled down on it.
In a China-like way, you go and do this and we'll get the operators to use your stuff.
I think it's a totally plausible narrative that they were signalling to people like Pardeep that they were going to support it heavily. And then at some stage they went, we're bored of Open RAN now.
Yeah.
And then he was like, thanks a fucking lot.
I completely go along with that. I think you read between the lines of what he said, and that's clearly what's going on. But to the point about what the sort of Dish fiasco, if you like, means now for Open RAN, I think it's I think it's really bad. I mean, in a way, they were the only real Open RAN network, I think, because if you look at the other examples that you've mentioned earlier, like the Rakuten one in Japan and the 1&1 network in Germany, well, the Rakuten network, as I understand it, was never really an Open RAN network. I know it always gets groups in with Open RAN because they weren't relying on the traditional vendors. They were kind of putting vendors together, some of their own technologies that they had and some companies that they subsequently bought. They're quite odd in the fact that they sort of own quite a lot of the stuff they're using, Rakuten. They're both operator and vendor. You do see some other companies starting to play that role now, like
what you mean with like the Symphony stuff?
Well, the RAN software, so the equivalent of Mavenir, for instance, the baseband software, used to come from a company called EchoStar that was a US organization, but it was bought by Rakuten as part of its, back in the days when Tariq Amin, who's now working in Saudi Arabia and sort of in charge of their AI strategy.
And looking buff.
He is looking buff.
He looks like a fucking movie star.
He dyed his hair, I think.
Yeah.
Tariq, if you listen to the podcast, have you dyed your hair?
Tariq,
it looks good. But
Tariq, have you gone full Hasselhoff?
But when he was there as CTO, I think even before he was sort of CEO at Rakuten Mobile, they bought EchoStar. They bought some other companies. They bought a company called Robin.io, which does the kind of cloud platform. It's like in the same ballpark as people like Red Hat and VMware and those guys. They're quite in quite an unusual position. And as I understand it, the big thing about Open RAN is that you rely on these industry standard specifications. That's the whole point. That everybody adheres to these specs.
That's why you can open it up.
And then you can open it up if everybody adheres to these specs and they know what they are and it's all open and then it becomes like an industry-wide thing and it makes it easier for people to kind of work in that community. But I don't think Rakuten was, certainly not at first, were doing it that way. They were just sort of working on an interface themselves that allowed them to kind of put EchoStar together with the radio unit vendors they wanted to use. So I think some people would be quite critical of the description of the Rakuten network as Open RAN, just on the sort of spec side. And the 1&1 in Germany has had lots of problems, and I think it's overcoming them, but it's still quite a small rollout, as I understand it, compared with what it should be. It's not like a nationwide.
It's been quite
network.
delayed.
I mean, we look at
Were they the ones who were bitching about Vodafone a little while back?
Yeah, they blamed a lot of their problems on the fact that they're relying on Vodafone as a tower co, because Vodafone has this business called Vantage Towers, which is its tower subsidiary that it's spun off, and it's attracted some other investors into that. But I think they still have the majority stake in it. So. It's
just yet another example of a European operator selling some of its family.
But I think with Vodafone, there was always the issue, spot the conflict of interest. Vodafone competes in Germany against 1&1, but it also has a tower co that 1&1 needs for its infrastructure.
And that tower co has been dropping the ball. Little conspiracy theorist, you.
So I mean that whole deployment's had problems, and it hasn't gone as far as people would have hoped it would have gone by now. So Dish is really the only, if you take those two out, Dish is really the only big Open RAN deployment. And
that leads. So let me just butt in because I want to tee up your story specifically, which the website says an 8-minute read. I contest that. It's a long story. I think it'd take me longer than 8 minutes to read it.
You can read it in 8 minutes.
So we use the same platform, Light Reading and Telecoms.com, because we're owned by the same company, Informer. My story about EchoStar and Trump is a 2-minute read. Ian's an 8-minute read. So we can conclude that yours is 4 times longer than mine. Anyway, but it's a great bit. I mean, as ever, you just do a deeper dive than I do.
I think it's 1,800 words long.
Right, well, that's
1,700, 1,800.
That's a good chunk of writing. Anyway, your headline is EchoStar route leaves its Open RAN vendors high and dry, and then your subhead is the decommissioning of Dish's radio access network, which I think we can all either assume or know is the direct byproduct of this deal that we're going on about.
Yeah, well, those are words from their own press release.
Right, okay, cool. It's bad news for AWS, Fujitsu, Mavenir, Samsung and Wind River, and could be another nail in the coffin of true Open RAN. Now, I got a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Why did you say true Open RAN?
Because I think the term has been sort of hijacked by other companies and even some analysts, and twisted and changed. It's mutated sort of beyond what it was supposed to be originally, I think.
Is this like a single vendor Open RAN?
Yeah, to some extent. But I think if you look at what Open RAN was supposed to be when it first came along, when people first started talking about it, sort of 2016, 2017, 2018 timeframe, in the run up to the sort of formation of the O-RAN Alliance, which is this group that's defining the specifications, basically, what I just talked about. It was very much about interoperability. That was the big pitch, is that this idea that the vendor market's too consolidated. We only really have 3 big vendors to choose from: Huawei, Ericsson and Nokia.
Yeah, and increasingly not Huawei in lots of places.
Increasingly not Huawei in lots of places. Nokia not in a particularly good position with its 5G strategy, as we've gone on about ad nauseum on the pod.
So you've got North America, which is like very heavy on Ericsson.
Yeah, well, it has become extremely heavy on Ericsson, more so in the last few years. But the other situation, after years of consolidation, you've only really got 2 Western vendors that you can use. Samsung really wasn't anywhere, I think. You go back a few years, it didn't really have a 3G, 2G sort of product set, which were still important technologies then. So people were like, how do we deal with this? And Open RAN was sort of presented as a kind of fix. It was like, if you open up these interfaces between different parts of the RAN, you open up the market, because it allows some of these little specialists that had just done one thing, like, for instance, Mavenir, which started out very much as a RAN software developer, and Altius started the same thing, or a radio unit vendor like MTI or something, one of those kinds of companies. What they've had to do in the past is go through the big systems integrators that have had to sort of work with Ericsson or work with Nokia on sort of integrating their technology into its product set, and not really be able to sort of deal with the telcos directly, because the telcos needed to buy this. They needed to buy this fully integrated set of products, basically, because of this monolithic thing, because these proprietary interfaces kind of joined everything together. So if you open them up, the idea was that it would provide a boost for specialists, because a telco could go and it could be like a sort of kid in a sweet shop, and it could sort of take different bits, or Lego's the example it likes to use. Take a bit here, take a bit there, and join it all together.
And pick the best of breed for each.
Pick the best of breed. Get the radios you really want, not be forced to buy a system that's got
best of breed / cheapest of breed. Yeah. So it's supposed to drive prices down as well.
It was supposed to drive prices down as well, and it's just not really worked out that way at all. If you look at the market share stats that Omdia, our sister company, comes out with, I think Ericsson, Huawei and Nokia, if you look at their combined market share last year, is bigger than it was the year before. These smaller companies like Mavenir, some of the ones that are involved in the dish deployment, haven't really been able to sort of establish themselves or go anywhere. And the fact this network's now looking like it's going to be decommissioned is just really bad news for these players. I mean, they've already had 2 years where the RAN market, this is not all to do with Open RAN. The RAN market's been in a really bad situation for 2 years, like with very sharp drops in spending. And you look at Ericsson and Nokia at the moment, they're not in great shape themselves. But what they do have is a installed base of customers, established business, like cash on the balance sheet, all these things that startups and smaller companies don't have, And the startups and smaller companies have just really been suffering. We've seen so Mavenir specifically, which I think has been a really big story this year, had this, you just talked about it, this debt restructuring. As part of that, it's got out of doing radio. It was doing radio units as well as software. It is an area that it had gone into. It's kind of got out of that side of things.
Which is if you're a software player, to suddenly get into those fucking big pricey bits of hardware is a big move.
And I think it's a sensible thing for them to do, is to get out of that, because that was obviously killing them, I think, it just costs so much to develop those things. And if they can sort of cut costs by not being involved in that's kind of a sensible move for them.
And that's one of the reasons I keep opining about this US government encouragement, because it's such a big roll of the dice, the strategic decision they made a few years ago, that you figure, they didn't just do it out of the blue. They must have had some reason to think this was a decent gamble.
Yeah, and this is the sort of irony of what's going on here. And you were talking about, we were sort of speculating on why they don't like EchoStar and what they've got in for Charlie Ergen. Donald Trump's big thing is, let's bring jobs back to America and make America great again and have all these wonderful American companies doing things. Whereas the biggest company in America in the 5G RAN market is Ericsson by far. It's like, I think Stefan Pongratz at Del Oro is estimating their market shares like somewhere between 50 and 70% in North America now.
Yeah, and we know from chatting about their quarterlies that an increasing proportion of all their revenues come from US.
44% in the second quarter. And every other country in the top 5 list of theirs, by the way, is on not more than I think 4%, 5% or something. So it's a massive skew towards North America.
Actually, you mentioned Stefan Pongratz from Deloro.
Yeah.
I just got to mention another story we wrote this week very quickly by Mary called "The Strong." I think you or Like Reading in General covered this as well. It's some Deloro numbers on the RAN. And her headline was "The Strong are getting stronger as RAN gets less open." And there's a couple of charts from Deloro down there, which basically says the open RAN, the decline they reckon has slowed.
Yeah.
But then they've
stabilising,
got
I think.
Stabilising, there we go.
My headline on the Huawei.
But then they've got a chart that says multi-vendor RAN forecast 2029.
Less than 10%.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that to me, that's the problem, and that's why I'm. This is why I put true Open RAN in, because I think there's a couple of things. What I've just been blathering on about for ages, this interoperability thing. I think if you go to press conferences these days and people talk about Open RAN, they're very keen to present it as something that's not really about interoperability. They use words like programmability, and they talk about things like the RAN intelligent controller and being able to use software applications on the radio access network. And they talk about these other things that were never really the initial consideration, and certainly wouldn't do anything to open up the market in the hardware and software, the big elements sense of it. You know, they might bring some innovation in if you can get a company to develop a software application that allows you to power down base stations in the evening when no one's walking through a particular area, but it's not going to bring a new baseband software company into the market or a new radio company into the market.
Yeah.
It's not that original focus seems to have lessened, I think.
Yeah.
So that's one issue I think
we can all agree that the narrative around Open RAN evolved quite dramatically.
And then the other problem I have with it is I think there's two other problems I've got with it. I think it was originally positioned very much as an alternative to the big kit vendors, like otherwise, kind of what's the point?
Opening up the market.
Opening up the market. We want it like there's no reason why Ericsson and Nokia should not be involved. And in actual fact, the operators wanted them to be involved because it would move things on more quickly. You needed to get acceptance from the big guys for it. But whenever people talk
because you're still going to have at least some of your kit being from
Of course, and it would move the market along. The idea was it would move the market along if you got acceptance and support, and those guys feeding into the standards group, by the way, the ARN Alliance and all that stuff. And I agree, I go along with that. I'm not saying that they're wrong about that. But Open RAN vendors were talked about as something quite distinct from Ericsson and Nokia and Huawei at first. And yet, which company's now claiming to have the biggest Open RAN deployment in the world is Ericsson with AT&T. I mean, that to me is just not an Open RAN. We'll get onto that in a minute.
Because it's single vendor.
Yeah, and so that's the third point related to that is if you include these specifications that allow you to mix and match different parts and have a multi-vendor network in the way that Dish was trying to do, and then all you do is go and get everything from the same vendor anyway, it might be Open RAN in name, but it's not really Open RAN in nature, is it? So to me, that's not really true Open RAN.
Not in spirit.
I think the multi-vendor thing that Stefan refers to, and he's been quite sort of out there with these terms, single vendor. He might even have been the person who came up with it. I like to think I came up with single vendor Open RAN, but I'm not sure I did.
I don't know if you did it before, Stefan, but it's certainly been something you've been flagging up for a long time.
Yeah, I have, but he's
don't I fucking know it?
He's the only person I know actually, and we're the other Omdi, our sister companies, the other guys who are kind of big on doing RAN kind of forecasting.
Remy,
but I think Remy's who's brilliant at all this stuff. But I think give Stefan credit for
more on Remy in a sec.
That he does sort of show this multi-vendor prediction and the single vendor prediction. Those are part of his forecast. So I think it's really helpful because if all of it in the future is, the specifications are there, but you're still buying your whole system from Ericsson, then it hasn't really changed anything. And the market share stuff, obviously at the moment, shows it isn't changing anything significantly. I mean, God knows what market share figures are going to look like now after. Yeah, I'm not saying Dish is big enough necessarily to move the needle massively.
No, but I think that's your underlying point, isn't it, in your headline, leaving those vendors high and dry. It's a direction of travel thing. It's another inflection point away from Open RAN, away from a long tail of other vendors.
Yeah,
and moving back. I mean, you said could be another nail in the coffin. It feels like a fucking major nail.
It does. Yeah, I mean, Pardeep at Mavenir, who was the only person I spoke to among the vendors that are involved in it. Now, I did approach others. I didn't hear anything back from Wind River. They just didn't even respond.
Right.
So poor form by Wind River. Wind River, by the way, just to sort of talk about where the companies fit in, because maybe we should chat about that a little bit. So the reason it was so multi-vendor is... and if you think about the RAN and the different parts of it, I mean, the two big elements, and the original concern was about having an open front haul interface, and that's the link between the actual radios themselves and the kind of servers that do the baseband software, all the RAN compute stuff. Yeah. Those are the two big elements, really, of your RAN.
And for people who don't know, it actually involves a lot of computing when you get the radio signal in to turn it into something useful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So in the case of the Dish network, what they've done is... their radio, that network, by the way, when that figure of 25,000 sites that Pardeep came out with, is Mavenir has about half of that, or claims to have about half of that. And what it's doing, it's not providing any radio units for Dish Network at all, but it's providing the RAN software. And that works with radios that Fujitsu, Japan's Fujitsu, provides. So that's another company that'd be affected. The actual hardware itself is a mixture of Dell servers with Intel chips, which is where Wind River comes in, the kind of cloud computing platform.
Which used to be owned by Intel.
It did.
Another Intel fuck up.
Yeah. So the cloud computing platform for that is provided by Wind River. And Wind River, interestingly, this is an example of why people talk about Open RAN being quite appealing. If you remember, it used to be VMware doing that job in the Dish network.
Right.
And last year they decided to change to Wind River. And all the speculation, I don't know if it was ever actually confirmed by Dish, but certainly the statements they were making pointed to the fact that they weren't very happy with price rises that had happened since Broadcom acquired VMware. VMware seems to be one of those companies that is increasingly kind of being, I'm certainly in the telco world, not really a consideration anymore in this kind of, that, you think about the guys who do that work, it's Red Hat, Wind River and VMware is the one that you don't really hear coming up that much anymore.
They don't come up very much.
But they basically made this big deal in sort of December last year about switching from VMware to Wind River, and they were saying that this is the nice thing about Open RAN, is that you have the freedom to kind of bring somebody else in and replace, something if you're not happy with it. Well, Wind River's not lasted very long, really, because they're going to decommission it all. And then the other half of the network, so this 25,000, you sort of say another 12,500 sites, is largely Samsung. And what Samsung's doing is the software like Mavenir, but it's also contributing radio units, and it's also pairing its software in some cases with Fujitsu's radios.
Okay.
And again, I suspect, I've never got this confirmed, but I suspect the deployment's quite similar in that some of the stuff is on Dell servers, Intel, Wind River kind of cloud computing platform. For the RAN software that you can centralize more easily, that's the bit where AWS comes in. So AWS was the kind of the cloud platform for the 5G core, which isn't effective. That's something they're going to keep, by the way, the 5G core. When they're still an MVNO, they'll have their own 5G core still, right? Which is, as I understand it, is Nokia provided. Which
I think, I'm going to probably reveal a massive level of ignorance, but quite larger, more sophisticated MVNOs to have their own core, don't they?
Yeah, so that makes
obviously
sense.
Confers some advantages.
Yeah, and that's hosted in, that core network is hosted in AWS data centers, but those data centers also do some of the RAN software, like the CU. They split the RAN baseband into CUs and DUs. Some of it's in a distributed unit, some of it's in a central unit. The central unit side of it is in these AWS data centers. That's where AWS comes in. I mean, it's bad for AWS because besides being the kind of flagship customer for people like Mavenir, this was actually AWS's flagship. Sort of, this is why it makes sense to do we talked to people like Daniel Royston about putting your 5G network in the public cloud and why it makes sense.
Daniel, public cloud cheerleader Royston.
Yeah, and
Rios, not Royston anymore, Rios.
Sorry, Danielle, if you're listening. Danielle Rios, yeah. And she talks about the economic attractions of putting your 5G network in the cloud, in the public cloud, and you can even put some of your RAN in there as well. This is really bad news for that, I think. To have this network in the situation it's in now, where it hasn't really worked, they're decommissioning it. It's not it's not obviously given them the advantage that they thought it was going to give in terms of being able to build it out cheaply and scale it up quickly. It just doesn't look very good. It's not going to persuade anybody else to go, oh, it would be a good idea to put our RAN network in the public cloud and do a kind of open RAN like Dish style deployment. I don't think so. So those that I think I've pretty much covered all the companies.
Certainly. I've been scrolling down your long ass story while you've been talking. And by the way, when I say that, I'm saying it with affection. What it is thorough and detailed, which is good.
So you're left now with this AT&T, the only Open RAN network, really big Open RAN network in the US now, in name, to me, not really in nature, is this AT&T Ericsson thing. Which has
got basically fuck all to do with Open RAN. It's the joke is it's what is it?
I mean, it's single vendor Open RAN. That's it. To use Stefan's description of it, really, in large part.
Yeah. It's there's a joke I had with my freelancer, something compatible and compliant, and one of Nick or Mary joked that that sounds like a good description of a marriage.
Yeah, exactly.
Compatible and compliant, but basically it's got, as you say, it's Open RAN in name only. It is compliant with all those standards, but it might as well not be. It might as well be monolithic.
Yeah, I mean if I'm going to
be closed,
if we're going to be completely fair, there are some other vendors involved in it, but I from what I understand, they have quite a small role. There are some Fujitsu radios being used at small cells, for instance. One thing AT&T's never addressed, interestingly, I think, is big announcement last year. Not only are we using radios from Ericsson and Fujitsu, but we're now introducing Mavenir as our third radio unit vendor. Well, where does Mavenir's withdrawal from doing radio units leave you? They never ever have answered. They've never ever sort of had a statement about what that means. I mean, that was a big.
Well, and that could be a chicken and egg thing. It could be that behind the scenes they rode back on that, and that's one of the reasons Mavenir bailed.
It could be, but this to me is the whole nonsense of it. Yeah, that people need to look at when they look at these announcements, and don't take it at face value when they're saying we're gonna use Mavenir radios, and that makes it more Open RAN. Well, you're not now.
I remember. I'm sure I've mentioned this on the pod before. I've certainly told you before, but when that big Ericsson AT&T announcement came out, like the day after, Ericsson was doing one of their Christmas lunches and you couldn't make it and I was there, and there were definitely a few Ericsson people, you know what they're like, they're quite understated, but there were definitely a few Ericsson people who were feeling a little bit butthurt about your coverage, which was basically to look the gift horse in the mouth. And you know, and I was, not that you need me to defend you, but you weren't there. I was like, well, I think those are perfectly fucking legitimate questions. And they were like, it's our big day.
Well,
and it's just like, well, I think you shouldn't be hubristic. I think that was what bothered me about the Ericsson reaction to that. It was a bit hubristic. It was like, look at that, we've kicked ass.
Yeah.
But then there was lots of stories, including in your coverage, I think, about how much they might have had to drop their pants in order to get the deal.
Yeah.
And all that sort of thing. How much they might have had to compensate AT&T for decommissioning some other shit.
Well, and the interesting thing is that hasn't really shown up yet to the extent that I thought it would, and from people talking to me.
In Ericsson's numbers?
In numbers from either Ericsson or AT&T.
Okay.
And I've sort of raised that with people since then, and they still seem to think that it will kind of cause, I mean,
it is a big deal, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
To get nearly all of the business of one of, if not the largest MNO available to them in the whole world, given that they're not going to get China Mobile's business.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fucking big deal. I'm not detracting from that, but it's still worthy of scrutiny, isn't it?
It is, and the ridiculousness of it. By the way, the points that I was making in that piece that you were saying Ericsson was picking on, the amount of people that I've spoken to off the record, who are, some of them very senior, by the way, in the telco world, that service providers, who've ridiculed that arrangement as an Open RAN one, is quite a lot.
No.
So it's obviously
I don't
not
think they were
just
picking holes in
me.
your piece. I think they just felt a little bit pouty about you raining on their parade.
I know, but all I'm doing is reflecting what other people are thinking about this.
That's your job.
Because if I'm writing it, you can be damn sure that some CTO somewhere is looking at this and going, "This is absolute nonsense."
Well, I mean, you must have had it. The amount of times, like off the record, we've had to explain to people what a journalist is.
Yeah.
Where they go, why the fuck do you write that? And it's like, well, because that's what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what people are telling us. Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah.
I think people all too often impart motive and bias on the part of journalists, and certainly plenty of journalists are biased, but they're too quick to ad hominem journalists just because they don't like the story that has come out.
Yeah. But here's the funny thing about, not funny, but the weird thing about what's happening with Dish and this decommissioning. And I was saying this earlier, you look at those companies that are involved in the rollout. Yeah, they're not all American companies. There's obviously Fujitsu, there's Samsung, there's a lot of other companies. But Mavenir was probably the US's best hope, really, of having a company. I mean, it's a long way from being like Ericsson or Nokia in terms of headcount. But
I think they thought they had the US state.
But that was the kind of probably the best hope. And then you look at, I mean, AWS is obviously not going to be going out of business because of what's happened on the Dish Network thing. Quite clearly, it's the last thing it's probably worried about.
AWS is doing all right. Although I keep reading, and maybe Richard Windsor is one of the people that brought this to my attention, that Google and Azure are gaining ground.
I heard
gaining
that as
ground
well.
on AWS, which is interesting. Anyway.
So, like Wind River's a US company. I don't think it has a US owner. I think the company that owns it's headquartered in Ireland now, bizarrely, probably for tax reasons.
Right.
Aptiv, I think it's called.
For tax and Guinness reasons.
Yeah, but they're a US company. Obviously, Intel and Dell are US companies and very much a part of the Open RAN story. I mean, it's a little bit tangent.
Can I just quickly butt in? I just went to Google Wind River.
There's a film called
First thing that comes up is a film. Second thing that comes up is an Indian reservation.
Yeah, and a film.
Come on, Wind River, you need to work on your brand.
A film written by the same guy who wrote Yellowstone, by the way, Taylor Sheridan.
Right.
Quite a grisly, disturbing film as well, I have to say.
But it's all like Wild West stuff, I presume.
Well,
it's probably to do with the reservation.
It's not a comfortable watch, put it like that.
No, I can imagine.
Anyway, off the tangent.
Yeah.
So Wind River's a US company. Intel and Dell were right. I mean, they're very much there in the whole Open RAN story, even though what they're doing is virtual RAN.
It's
really,
still California.
Not quite the same thing.
It's not Ireland. It's California. Anyway, go on.
Oh, it's California. Okay. Yeah. So those are US companies that are kind of affected by this. I mean, again, Intel and Dell have got bigger things to worry about than the Dish Network. But the guys who are on the network and edge side at those organisations will be looking at this, and it's not a positive for them. Clearly, that network's gone the way it's going,
and it's not a positive for Open RAN in general.
It's not positive
for the long tail of RAN vendors.
Yeah, and then other companies that might have hoped to sort of be introduced into the sort of mix, which is the thing that you have with Open RAN, is the option of, this is what AT&T always goes on about, we're going to bring other radio unit vendors in future. Obviously now Dish is no longer really an opportunity for them either. So here you've got a US
like
president.
A reconsolidation.
You've got a US president who goes on about bringing jobs to America and wanting US companies to do better, and yet the network that was actually using some of them to some extent is now.
But he doesn't give a shit so long as Ericsson invests in like plant and
exactly. And in fairness to Ericsson, I mean, is it fair to say Ericsson's almost now a US company? I mean, the CEO seems to spend most of his time living.
Boy,
he's
probably got a Yank accent by now.
Well, he's got US citizenship.
Yeah.
He's got an American wife. He listens to Bruce Springsteen. he likes ice hockey. That's quite Swedish as well.
Yeah.
And he's talked about moving the headquarters to America. It's like, And he makes most of his money in America. So maybe Ericsson is actually a US company now. Really, let's be honest.
We're running out of time in order to be able to fit in other stuff. Do you think have we done the EchoStar? AT&T to your satisfaction.
Can't think of anything else to say about it. Otherwise, go over the same points again and again.
No. I think we've covered it pretty well. But it is interesting, and I think what we've done justice to is how much more there was to the deal than just the deal itself.
Yeah,
like the broader ripples from it. So that's good.
So we get an A-star on our A level on EchoStar. Do you reckon?
I think so. For because we get that extra grade for just going beyond just the obvious stuff. I
hope so. Yeah.
I want to say before we move on, and by the way, this is the usual opportunity to have a little pause if you think you need it.
Yeah, let's do
it. I found the comments from last week on LinkedIn about when we banged on about AI. And my mate, actually, he often listens. I don't think I've ever given him a shout out. My old university mate, Neil, who lives in New Zealand now. All right, Lino. He listens to the podcast and occasionally pings me on WhatsApp in the middle of the night because he's on the other side of the world. No. He just says he quite likes, because we don't see each other because he lives in fucking New Zealand. He says he just quite likes hearing me banging on.
Yeah, that's nice.
And I think he particularly likes the AI stuff because that's probably the most, partly because it's the most tangible and accessible for non-telecoms people. Anyway, he pinged me about it and saying he enjoyed that, and he loves all the sort of dystopian Terminator-y stuff. So, all right, Lano, here's a shout out. Although the chances of him getting this far when we did a much more telecoms-y in the weeds that were quite small.
He's never going to get through this one.
But then other people on LinkedIn, we mentioned Michael Roger, otherwise known as Dave from Huawei Canada. He goes, if you told me from years ago that AI could eliminate the need to dig through gigabytes of DU logs to find out what the F was going on. He's not as profane as I am. He just says F rather than fuck. What the F was going on with the system, he would happily have accepted the trade-off and sacrificed the rest of humanity to the AI overlords. Ari Barron, who I've mentioned previously on the pod, is always very kind about the pod. It just said yay. I'm not sure what he's referring to. Maybe saying yay to the AI overlords. And then a guy who I met face-to-face, who's always been very kind about the pod, but I met him in Barcelona at Mobile World Congress, on the Ericsson stand, funnily enough, Alexander Ilivanov, who's a RAN and project coordinator at United Group. He said, gentlemen...
Oh, they're a big operator.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. He goes, gentlemen, this is a really intelligent, down-to-earth and pragmatic comment and analysis on AI. I really like the historical analogies and predictions you make. Totally agree with all you said. So, Alexander, thank you. We like comments like that.
Someone else who liked it, who didn't comment on LinkedIn but just texted me about it, and he wouldn't mind me calling him out, is Ronnie Haroldsvik.
Oh, right.
Who we've had on. We've had his boss
on, but he was in the room.
And Ronnie was in the room, and he just enjoyed it. He thought it was a good one. So
well, it's a fascinating topic.
But it was not core telecom, I suppose. It was more general sort of stuff, wasn't it?
It's allowed.
It's allowed, yeah.
All right, let's have a quick break, and then we'll do the long tail. Okay, we're back in the room. We're going to move on to a couple of other stories. We're going to get back to you first, Ian. You've written a couple of stories about Huawei this week. One is basically, we just mentioned our colleague Omdia, Remy Pascal. I'm always nearly fucking his name up and calling him Pascal Remy.
Pascal Remy sounds like the name of a cartoonist or an artist.
Because I'm right, Pierre.
Not an analyst.
Both those names can be first names and surnames, can't they, in France?
Yeah.
So that's just...
Like Thierry Henry.
There we go.
Terry Henry.
I mean, I can't really moan because Scott's a surname as well.
Yeah.
In fact, so is Ian.
Oh, yeah. Is it?
In fact, even better, the founding member and rhythm guitarist of Anthrax, one of my favourite bands, is called Scott Ian.
I mean, that's very unusual, though, is a surname, Ian.
Well, it comes up. I mean, you get first names and surnames, like James. You get people with surname James, don't you?
In French, we have Maurice for first name. So there.
That's true.
But it's normally spelled differently, isn't it?
You should wind him up and just start calling him Maurice.
I mean, no one's called Pacino as a Christian.
You guys have
but that's just a weird surname.
Do you have any middle names, by the way?
My middle name's Diego.
Oh yeah, right. I knew that actually.
Yeah, because I was born
Diego Pacino. He's very
English. I was born in Chile.
Yeah. William.
William. Oh yeah. That's
Ian
boring.
William. That's boring.
Because it's a good one.
Well, apparently William Morris has been in the family for generations. The middle name.
Isn't that cigarettes?
He's an heir to
No, William Morris is like the old sort of.
That's Marlborough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Marlborough fags.
No, he's
a Philip Morris.
Oh, Philip Morris.
William Morris is like a crafts guy. Okay. He's like an English socialist who was part of the.
Yeah. No, I was confusing it with Philip Morris.
William Morris is the talent agency that owns the UFC now.
Okay. All right.
The biggest, anyway.
Yeah,
so,
the original William
sorry,
Morris
everyone. We've come back and we've just gone off on a stupid tangent.
Maybe I'll cut that up.
No, keep it in.
I know.
It's all good. It's all good. People like the tangents. So, yeah, to your stories, whatever your fucking name is, you wrote Huawei overtakes. Oh, that's it. That's how we got into it because I was talking about Remy Pascal. Huawei overtakes Nokia outside China as Open RAN stabilizers. So part of it was based on what we were just talking about with the Deloro data.
Yeah.
But then you and I both got a message from Remy talking about the relative. And I won't steal your thunder, but
no, you can.
Well, just basically how
just drink beer.
Outside of China, you would expect Huawei to be lower down because there's loads of places outside China where they're not allowed, like a lot of Western Europe, although not all. To your second story. And obviously North America, but it turns out they're still doing all right despite all that. So that's one angle. And
turns out they're allowed in Western Europe more than they should be.
Well, there we are. And so then your other story that you wrote 3 days ago, Telefonica hooked on Huawei years after, quote, clean network, close quote, vow. So take it in whatever order you want, but we're going to talk about those two stories.
Yeah, well, I'll do it in the order that you introduced them, because the the Huawei overtaking Nokia, I think, is interesting. Like Remy Pascal, not Pascal Remy, who's off doing artwork in the south of France or something.
Definitely not Philip Morris.
Yeah, not Philip Morris either. He, one of his, he's basically our sort of RAN forecasting guy, and comes out with all the data and analyses what that means.
He's going toe to toe with Deloro, basically.
Yeah, him and Stefan Pongratz are like they're like the Federer and Nadal of the sort of RAN.
I'm sure they have just as friendly a rivalry as well.
Yeah. So he comes out with quarterly updates. I mean, one thing you've seen in the RAN market, I think I was talking about this with the Dish story, is it's just been a shit show for a couple of years.
Yeah.
After
no growth.
Yeah, no growth and big decline. So I think so Omdia's numbers, if I've got them right, and I think I have, is that 2022, which is when things were kind of at a bit of a high, I think, it was generating about 45 billion in revenues, and then it went down to 40 billion the year after that. Drop of 5 billion is quite a lot.
Yeah.
Then it went down to 35 billion in last year.
Right, so we're talking about 20% drop.
So drop of 10 billion in annual revenues over a 2-year period is really substantial. I think Stefan Pongratz, whose figures are really similar, by the way. So they're both their numbers are both very, very similar.
It implies they're not just pulling them out of their arse.
Yeah, and he had put some blogs up saying it was the worst he could remember since the sort of early 2000s. I think when we had the kind of .com crash and all the fallout from that, it was the worst situation he could remember. And one thing that's happened this year, so you see in Remy's recent stuff, and I think again Delora would be aligned with this, is a kind of stabilisation of revenues. It looks like it's going to be a little bit higher this year than it was last year.
It's kind of bottomed out.
It's bottomed out a little bit higher outside China, I should say. If you include China in it, I'm not quite sure.
Well, as Gabe said when he was on the pod a couple of weeks ago, China's a bit opaque, isn't it? So it's hard to fucking know.
Yeah. So outside China, and those numbers are global figures, by the way, anyway. But outside China, you're looking at some slight, low single-digit percentage growth. But what Remy has also been doing in some of his recent updates is showing, and again, I think Delora does the same thing. They kind of show the vendors ranking, top 3 vendors in different regions of the world.
Yeah, and by the way, as a former analyst, which I know you were even longer ago, one of the reasons they do that is they tease some data without giving away the granular data because they want you to pay for that.
Yeah.
And so they give you market share or market positioning without giving you the underlying data set.
So obviously when I write all this stuff, it's obviously doing huge benefit for Remy, and
I'm sure.
Yeah, I should basically be paid in neck oil, I think, for my stories.
I'm sure Evan will be very grateful. In fact, I'm sure he'll pay for the next Nando's.
And the interesting thing that I picked out from the last thing that he sent, which was the sort of Q2 figures, is outside China. Now, if you include China in it, the order goes like this. It goes Huawei is the biggest company in the world still. And maybe that wouldn't surprise people because China's so big, big. And I was saying there's millions of these base stations. It's not only got a lot of people, more people than any other country in the world except for India.
Yeah.
It has invested a lot in site coverage.
It's definitely more technologically sophisticated than India.
Yeah, it's technologically sophisticated. It's very densified in terms of its 5G coverage, and the big telcos there, China Mobile, China Unicom and China Telecom, they pretty much spend all their money with Huawei and ZTE.
Yep.
And they don't really do anything with Ericsson and Nokia these days. And if you've got that as a captive market, then you're laughing. You can sort of get away with not doing that well in other parts of the world. So
basically, ever since the Swedish regulator had a look at Huawei, it was like, okay,
yeah,
that fucking game.
Finished it off for Ericsson in China as soon as they did that. And so it doesn't surprise people to know that the orders Huawei, Ericsson, Nokia, if you include China, if you take China out of the picture, the order for a little while, or certainly in the first quarter, was Ericsson, Nokia, Huawei.
Ex-China, yeah.
Excluding China.
Yeah.
Then, in the second quarter, Remy's latest numbers show Ericsson, Huawei, Nokia.
What's that all about?
Headline. What's that all about? Well, I mean, it was a bit of an opportunistic headline, to be honest with you, if I'm going to...
but good for you. I hope you got some traffic reward.
Yeah, it did get a lot of traffic.
Yeah, cool.
But
look, just to like quickly go off on a tangent about journalistic best practice. The headline's the sales pitch to the story.
Yeah.
As long as the body copy justifies the headline, it's entitled to be a little bit hyperbolic and a little bit salesy.
Yeah.
As long as you, because sometimes you click on something and then you're like, where in the body copy is that headline justified? That I find annoying.
Yeah. Well, if I was going to be my critic,
right,
I would say that he's implied that Huawei has overtaken
Nokia, full stop,
because it's eating into its market share and stuff. Yeah. And actually, I think if you look at the numbers, it's a lot more subtle than that. I mean, they often tend to do quite well in the second quarter, Huawei, for seasonality factors. You know, like vendors have their own times of the year when they're doing well. I've never quite got that side of things.
Maybe it's just like a pendulum.
The second quarter tends to be quite a good quarter for them anyway. This is stuff I've got from Remy, by the way, that I'm spewing out now. Yeah. They did very well they have had market share gains, but they did quite well in emerging markets where they've been strong anyway. Yeah,
exactly. So what I get from that is what they're doing is not necessarily in a specific country winning business from Nokia.
They're not.
What they're doing is doing fucking well in the let's say, for the sake of argument, the third of the world that isn't directly in the American or Chinese sphere of influence,
totally.
Which includes Latin America, includes Africa, includes Middle East, includes parts of South East Asia, and so on.
And the other thing Remy pointed out was that Nokia's market share between Q1 and Q2 was pretty stable. So it's not like they've taken market share from Nokia.
But Huawei's doing well.
Huawei's doing well. They've advanced, obviously, at the expense of someone, but it's not necessarily. It's not a case of them like replacing Nokia in networks, kind of thing.
It also could be newer rollouts in more developing countries that are going to be slower to the 5G game and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. But the interesting thing for me about this is now, and if you look, here's what he does is I think he has 5 regions that he looks at, not 5 countries, 5 regions of the world. I'm struggling to remember them now. There's but obviously Asia and Oceania is one, Europe's another.
Fuck.
What did George Orwell pronounce it like in his silly little accent? Anyway, yeah. The big regions, the big continents, basically.
It is Oceania.
Yeah.
So it just seemed like such a weird word to come out of my mouth that I lost confidence.
Oceania, yeah. The Americas, Europe, the big 5 regions.
Well, the 3 regions of the world is divided into broadly is Americas, EMEA, and Asia.
Yeah. Well, what Remy's done is North America, Latin America, and the Caribbean, Asia and Oceania, Europe, and then I think the Middle East and Africa.
See, this isn't a thing directed directly at Remy. We used to have this when I was an analyst. I always thought Asia, which accounts for about 2/3 of the world's population,
isn't really one region.
It's a fucking big region.
Yeah,
it really should be subdivided more. If you can subdivide the Americas and EMEA, why can't you subdivide Asia? But anyway,
well, here's the shocking statistic. In 3 of those regions, the other ones being Europe, not EMEA, obviously Europe, because I think the Middle East and Africa is separate, and North America. In the other 3, Huawei's number 1.
So Latin America
is the one that's maybe going to surprise people a little bit more, given all the US fuss about we don't want Huawei in European telecom networks because they're allies and we're concerned about spying activities and all this stuff on their doorstep.
I know.
Right next to them.
Well, I think America burned a fuck of a lot of political and diplomatic capital in Latin America decades ago.
And this sort of ties in.
What do you reckon?
To my other
do you reckon
story.
your Venezuelan?
No, I don't think they regard the South American countries as allies anyway. So
but they do count them as their sphere of influence.
It's their sphere of influence, and it's on their doorstep.
Sure, yeah.
This is what I'm saying. Is like the countries that are right next to where you are geographically.
But that's my point. Like going way back to completely tangential stuff, like the war on drugs and orchestrated coups in Chile and Brazil and probably Venezuela as well. America's been dicking about with. US has been dicking about Latin America for a long time, so I'm not surprised that.
So is China, though.
Yeah.
I mean, China has a huge presence in Venezuela. They have all these.
But I don't think it's
there.
been as assertive and interventionist and.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, they invaded Panama.
It's been more subtle. Who did? China?
No, the US.
Yeah, exactly. They invaded Panama
like 30 years ago.
They've orchestrated coups all over the fucking place, though. Anyway, go on. And then there's a war on drugs where they're just steaming into Colombia all the time.
So they have to, but they consume it. So that's right. Sorry.
No, I just think it's quite interesting that given, we've had several years now since the first Trump administration of this effort to kind of clamp down on Huawei.
They're still doing all right.
They're still doing okay. This is the interesting thing about the second Trump administration, some of its policies about, not preventing NVIDIA from selling chips to China, for instance, or interfering with Intel, is I'm pretty sure I think I started that story off with some line about if you could have sent Omdia's latest stats back in time to members of the first Trump administration, they'd probably have been fairly horrified to see that Huawei was number one in the world. And not only number one in the world, but number one in a bunch of important regions, including Latin America and the Caribbean.
In fact, there's an overlap between your two stories in your second paragraph where you go, this is not what people like Mike Pompeo, former US Secretary of State, and Keith Cratch, who I'd never heard of, the author of the anti-China, quote, clean networks, close quote, policy.
Yeah, well, he was basically kind of Pompeo's understudy, right? As I understand it. Our friend John Strand knows him.
Okay.
And he's the guy who, as I say, this. So here's the link with my other story, the Telefonica one, that he came up with this. I mean, I don't know if you remember reading about this.
No, I remember that. I always thought it was a kind of unsettling. The word "clean," I wasn't happy with at all.
No, well, a lot of people weren't happy about it, because the implication, obviously, of using Chinese vendors is that you're dirty.
Exactly. It's just a very, I don't know. But leaves bad taste in your mouth.
But the companies were signing up to this, obviously. I mean, it's very similar to what's happening now, where people just want to kiss Trump's ass because they're worried that if they don't, they're going to get crucified, I guess.
And with a fucking horse's head in their bed.
And so what does a clean network mean? A clean network, from Keith Crash's perspective, very little to do with Open RAN, actually. Yeah, interestingly, given that Open RAN was being talked about during the sort of 2016 to 2020 timeframe quite a lot, Keith Crash's thing was that you just don't want to have any Chinese influence there at all.
Because they'll be hoovering out your data, or they'll have a kill switch, which Xi Jinping can flick anytime he wants. Or whatever,
And then we had Mike Pompeo doing his European tour, while he was listening to AC/DC. Sending Huawei to hell.
That is in his favour.
And all that.
Huawei to hell.
Yeah. and
Huawei to hell.
Yeah, that's what he was probably singing in the shower.
Right. I don't want to think about Mike Pompeo in the shower.
No, but I'm just saying that's probably what he was singing in the shower. And
you heard last Christmas, I gave Yamaha.
I gave Yamaha.
This year you gave it Huawei. Okay.
Gave it Huawei.
My God. Okay. So he was traveling around Europe, putting pressure on European governments to remove Huawei from their networks. You've got this thing called the 5G toolbox. That's the European Union's effort to try and get Huawei and ZTE out of 5G, basically. And it's had mixed results.
Come up with by a bunch of European tools.
Yeah. It hasn't really done what it says on the tin.
No.
Several years on.
And who could possibly have anticipated that?
Yeah, and
it's because Thierry Breton's not there with his haircut to make it happen.
Probably, but I mean, in the past, I think I've been quite critical of companies like, not critical, but just pointing out the fact that organisations like Deutsche Telekom, which is Europe's biggest operator, and Vodafone, are still using lots of Huawei across Europe, despite the fact that the European Union has come out with all of this toolbox nonsense, and despite the fact that the Americans have been leaning on them, it's only had limited success. Germany's been really resistant to all of this.
So why is it? So you note in your piece that you wrote that Telefonica.
Yeah, Telefonica.
Why do you think people like Deutsche Telekom and Telefonica are still, despite all of this toolbox stuff, why are they still going so hard on Huawei?
Well, the Deutsche Telekom one's easy to figure out, and that's, I think, to do with Germany's trade relationship with China.
They're sort of kind of in the middle of the spheres of influence.
I think their biggest export market is China. It might even be bigger than, the US is a big
like a
trade
Beamer
partner
over in China.
They love a Beamer. They love machine tools. You can actually get all this data. I've looked at it in the past, and you can get the figures for European countries and trade with China. And Germany's right up there. It's obviously. I think even Deutsche Telekom CEO Timotheus Högers, I heard him speaking at a conference. It wasn't one I went to. I sort of dialed in. He was saying. He pretty much said that. He pretty much said, well, if we go and take it out, then there's going to be consequences for German industry. It was like...
Well, this is the awful thing. Quite often, and I might at the end of in a minute go off on this, quite often talk about geopolitical stuff. But that's one of the things that annoys me about it, is how market distorting it is. You've got these egos. You've got Trump's ego, you've got Xi's ego.
Yeah.
And they're all like, well, if you do this, I'm going to get annoyed and I'm going to behave in a petulant way.
Yeah.
And then the other person, and you just got everyone else in the middle, like they're in some kind of abusive relationship, trying to work out how to placate these fuckers.
Yeah. So, by the way, it's not just Deutsche Telekom, it is the big German operators that have this stance. So Telefonica in Germany and Vodafone in Germany have the same approach. They don't want to take that country is very, very reliant on Huawei and its 5G radio access network. It's something like half of the deployed radio access network infrastructure.
Even now.
I think it's a bit more than that. It's more like 60%, I think, according to John Strand's data. And no one's really taken issue with those numbers that he's come out with. So, there's two things. I think there's the government not wanting to order a rip and replace because it's concerned about what would happen with China, and Sweden's a good precedent for that.
Yeah, as we touched on a minute ago.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is the telcos themselves. Yeah, John Strand's line would probably be they could cope with a rip and replace. In the bigger scheme of things, it's a couple of billion at most. If you look at Barclays' numbers, it might be a bit disruptive in the short term, but you could get it done. Blah de blah de blah. Sure, but telcos don't want to spend money that they don't have to spend. Yeah, and the other thing is, people still like Huawei stuff. It seems no one that I've spoken to over the last few years has complained, despite all the sanctions and all the stuff about you can't use TSMC anymore because it's reliant on American equipment and all of this stuff. No one I've spoken to on the network side of things has raised big concerns about the quality of their products deteriorating. Yeah, I mean, they're still regarded as...
leaving aside, the observations people might make about like Chinese IP theft and the provenance of it, however they got there, I think everyone acknowledges that Huawei's technology is as good as, if not better.
Yeah.
So yeah, we understand that. So the interesting thing, your point on the geopolitical side, Germany's kind of stuck in the middle. So where does that leave Spain? If we take Telefonica as a proxy for Spain?
So Spain. So the other story I wrote is very much about Telefonica. The reason I wrote that, I just think it's interesting sometimes to look at what companies said a few years ago and then look at what's actually happened. If you remember, they had the former CEO, who's not there now, was Jose Maria Alvarez Priete Lopez or something.
Sorry to butt in. Looking at your story, you've done a classic Ian opening paragraph. Ian, this is Ian's opening sentence or so. Several hundred years ago, the charming and fabulously named Hernán Cortés de Monroy y Pizarro Altamirano, I didn't know that was his full name, because Pizarro's another guy as well.
Yeah, another Pizarro.
Sailed across the sea with some fellow Spaniards and did unspeakable things in Latin America that would have horrified any progressively minded countryman back home. That's Ian's fucking opening paragraph to this story. Anyway, go on, mate.
Yeah. So the reason I wrote that sentence is because there was an interview given by Telefonica's chief operating officer quite recently, and Reuters took that. I think it's Reuters that did the interview with him, and they kind of led with the headline, Telefonica will continue using Huawei in Brazil, but it's moving away from it in Spain and Germany. That was kind of the headline, pretty much like that.
Because in Brazil, they're a bit more like, we'll do what
they don't care. They don't have restrictions, which I think if you're in the EU or you're in the Trump administration and you're looking at the behaviour of a European headquartered business in different parts of the world, and it's coming out with a comment that it's only going to be guided by, what the government says, you could, if you're going to be really cynical and critical, you could say, well, a European company is helping to sort of enrich this organisation that we regard as a major security threat.
But then on the flip side, all things being equal, that same European company will probably go much bigger on Huawei than it currently is.
Yes.
For the aforementioned reasons of being technologically good and probably relatively cheap as well.
But the other problem I have with it is I don't really see how they're moving away from Huawei in Germany and Spain, as the chief operating officer said to Reuters. So if you look at what's going on in Germany, and I think telcos have been allowed to get away with it a bit in Germany and aren't being scrutinised as much by the mainstream media at the moment. Because
are you trying to imply that the EU might favour certain countries over others?
No, I'm saying that
because I would push back on that.
I'm saying that people aren't scrutinising what's going on in Germany with Huawei as much as they were maybe 2 years ago, because I think the Germans came up with this solution to the Huawei problem that involved making sure you don't use it in the core by the end of 2026 and making sure that you don't use its control systems in your network in your radio access network by the end of 2029. And that got interpreted, I think, by a lot of the mainstream press, including people who wrote books on Huawei. Eva Du's book, House of Huawei, I think she got very badly wrong. She interpreted that to mean that Germany had ordered its telcos to remove Chinese products from their networks. It's much more nuanced than that. I mean, the fix that the German operators are working on is to not take Huawei out of the network if they can avoid doing that, as long as they can find a substitute for the management system, which is just a bit of software basically that controls updates and configuration.
So it's funny that the UK has actually been much more strident in terms of anti-Huawei messaging.
So the argument about reducing reliance on it in Germany, to me, doesn't hold water at all. By the way, the core network side of things, taking it out of the core by the end of 2026, none of them have it in the core network when that legislation was introduced.
So that was redundant.
It was moot when it was introduced. The Spain is a really interesting example at the moment of a country that people, I think, thought was moving away from Huawei, or was maybe, to use Keith Crash's expression, clean.
Yeah.
When in actual fact, it seems like it's moving more closely towards Chinese operators. I mean, there's been numerous stories over the last few weeks about Mass Orange visiting Huawei and ZTE in China, about it using Huawei for its network operations center. These are reports, by the way. The companies have had very little to say if you try and approach them.
Yeah,
they won't comment.
They're not going to fucking touch that with a barge pole, are they?
The latest Spanish government doing a wiretaps deal with Huawei.
Yeah, we spoke about that before, I think.
You've spoken, you've written about that. And then you look at Telefonica, and the latest I saw, which I think you might even have written about as well, was that they'd renewed a core network contract with Huawei until 2030 for the consumer business, not the business market, but the consumer business, which, by the way, is bigger anyway, until 2030. This is really interesting in light of the clean network stuff that Keith Crash was coming out with a few years ago, because the guy whose name I just mentioned, Alvarez Pieti, I can't pronounce his whole name.
No, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
But he was the former CEO, and he's quoted in Keith Crash's statement, which I think I've linked to from my story. If you might be able to find it.
Yeah, sure.
He's quoted in that saying something like, "We're already clean in Spain, I think," and.
Oh, there we are. He's got his own fucking website. He's
got his own website. If you look up the comment by Alvarez Pieti,
Keith Crash is a good name. Yeah, I mean, it's spelled Krach, but Keith Crash, he sounds like a professional wrestler.
Yeah, but he basically gives a promise that all of their networks in these countries will not have Huawei kit in them in the near future. I think he says something like in the near future, and clearly that's not the case. If you're renewing, if you're then saying years later that you're going to be heavily reliant on it in Brazil because there's no regulations there affecting that. If you're continuing to use it in Germany and you're working on a fix that basically just takes out a bit of control software, if you're renewing a core network contract, that one, by the way, hasn't been confirmed by Telefonica, but it was reported that they've renewed this core network contract. If you're doing all these things, how are you having a clean, what Keith Crash would call a clean network?
Well, can I just say one thing? I've been looking through Keith's website.
Yeah.
And there's one bit scrolling down the link that you put in your story. It put clean countries and territories. Blah, blah, blah. These are the people who've promised to do what they're told. And Spain isn't there.
Look up Alvarez Pieti.
What you mean? Control F on his website.
Look up his on that page you're looking at, and look at the statement that he gave to.
Okay, all right. Notable quotes. This is from the website Telefonica. This is from the Keith Crash website. Telefonica states in its digital manifesto that, quote, security is paramount, and its CEO and chairman Jose Maria Alvarez Payete Lopez. Too many fucking names, Spain. Can you just do something about that?
Well, they're doing the same thing they were doing for the 1500s. There's too many, yeah.
I mean, this is one bloke. He's got 2 first names, one of which is a girl's name, and then he's got 3 surnames.
Because they use the mom's name and then sometimes even further.
I mean, where does it stop here?
Yeah.
It's
anyway,
out of control.
So Jose Maria, etc., declared, quote, Telefonica is proud to be a 5G clean path company. So they've got this concept of clean path. Telefonica Spain and O2 UK, which is obviously owned by Telefonica, are fully clean networks. All right, yeah. And Telefonica...
How can they be fully clean if you just renewed a core network?
Well, quite. And Telefonica Germany and Vivo will be in the near future.
Vivo, by the way, is a Brazilian business.
Yeah. Will be in the near future without equipment from any untrusted vendors, i.e. dirty.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fucked up. And now they're not doing it. It's almost like politicians sometimes say shit and then they don't follow through on it.
Well, he's a CEO. He's not a politician. He was the former CEO of Telefonica.
All right.
Yeah, but
no. I'm talking about. But Keith Crash quoted him on it.
Yeah, Keith. But that's the quote that Alvarez.
No,
Payete
fair enough.
And
but he might have just said it to get him to go away.
Well, he might. But I find it interesting that a CEO is CEO and chairman of Telefonica. If this is the UK and someone had given an assurance like that,
yeah,
and then 5-6 years later nothing's happened.
So that was my point about the politicians. I take your point that Jose Maria said it, but
Jose Maria, I like the way you sort of talk about him like
I'm his mate.
Hang out with him.
Yeah.
Have a drink of Madry.
But my point is, just don't bring up Madry, mate.
Joe Mary.
That'll provoke me.
Madry.
God, I saw an advert for Madry. Now you've done it. I saw an advert for Madry where they're coming out with all these like Madrid stuff and people flamenco dancing and fucking getting up to Spanish shit. And it really offended me. For people who haven't heard me go on about this on the pod before, Madry has got nothing to do with Spain. It was invented in England. It's just given some Spanish branding. It's not like Dos Equis or Estrella or whatever.
If anything, the ad tries too hard. That's the thing.
Yeah, exactly. They protest too much.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll reel that tangent in. But the point is, he says these things in the knowledge that this guy's just a blowhard, ephemeral politician who won't follow through. So he goes, yeah, we'll do all that, whatever. Now, fuck off.
No, I agree that that's probably why he said it to him. But you're saying it to the guy who's, by the way, Mike Pompeo's adopted this strategy, and it was a big deal at the time. And a few years later, clearly... It just doesn't seem to. Yeah. It seems.
No, and that's a good story.
My question to Telefonica, which they declined to sort of comment on, was: Are you still a clean network company, or have you changed your strategy?
Or are you filthy?
Are you a clean network company as defined by Keith Crash? I should say, because I do agree with you that it's a bit of a weird way to sort of describe a China free network. But,
okay, that's a good one. We've only got like a short bit of time to do my last bit. As is always,
they're waiting for us.
As is always, and Hannah's waiting for us. Hannah, who was out at lunch with Pierre, so she must be mashed already. Or do you think she's paced herself and just had a few waters?
Paced herself,
yeah. We're about to find out in about half an hour. So very quick one. It kind of overlaps with all this geopolitical stuff we were just talking about. Couple of stories. I wrote this, I'm trying to find them. Oh, yeah. So one story I wrote was headlined, US Internet Forum sue Ofcom over Online Safety Act. So regular listeners to the pod will heard me ranting about the Online Safety Act for ages. But for the record and for anyone who's never heard it before, I've got no problem with the Online Safety Act law as it protects children from predators and inappropriate content on the internet. But I think the Online Safety Act has always been the childcare aspect has always been used as a Trojan horse for broader censorship, and that's where I've pushed back. Anyway, and plenty of other people. It's hardly unique to me. And then the Online Safety Act created a sort of new wave of sort of political aggro this year when a tranche of it kicked in where where Ofcom gets to insist that websites have to do two things. One, which is to verify the ages of their users. Another, which is to get rid of anonymity. And obviously, there's loads of places on the internet where people don't want to age verify. I mean, the obvious one is porn sites, but there's other places where people don't want to age verify. Partly just from a pure privacy point of view, they don't want to have to hand over any kind of credentials.
You don't want to verify anything on a porn site.
Well, quite. You don't want to leave some fucking footprint, do you?
No.
Let me upload my passport to this website. Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to say, Scott Ricciano, I would like some porn, please.
Send me mail by the actual post,
And please make sure to tell the government that I'm well into this particular disturbing subsection that I'm trying to buy into. But anyway, and a couple of websites in the States that are called 4chan and Kiwi Farms.
Oh, 4chan still exists, my God.
Well, apparently so. I think it's 4chan. Yeah. Yes, it is. Are trying to sue them, but mainly over jurisdiction. So the Online Safety Act is trying to impose this stuff. Basically, leaving aside, 4chan and Kiwi Farms are very contentious websites because they're two of these forums where you get this really edgy stuff, borderline illegal stuff, harassment, conspiracy theorizing, just all kinds of wacky internet shit. For me, as a fairly absolutist free speecher, I still think it should be allowed, just because I'm not a fan of censorship. But I get it. I get the security, I get the safety concerns over places where people can slander you or where people can incite internet pylons, all that sort of thing. So, I'm not blind to that sort of thing. Anyway, and Kiwi Farms is a similar sort of thing. But yeah, Ofcom's trying to, through the Online Safety Act, trying to force these two sites to adhere to the Online Safety Act. And they're going, hold on a sec, we're fucking American. You can't tell us what to do. And that's the interesting part of it, is the jurisdictional part, which actually sort of conversely refers back to the segment we just had before, which is America trying to impose its jurisdiction on places like Europe.
Yeah.
In fact, I even... So I spoke about this. Oh yeah, I'll read myself back. I wrote, while it's a bit rich for Americans to moan about other countries seeking to impose their will across borders, given their own government's enthusiasm for doing just that, the legal point is valid. So I'll stand by that point. The Yanks do it to us, and they don't like it when we do it back to them, but they can both be wrong.
Yeah.
And so they've filed a suit in the States saying, Ofcom, you got no jurisdiction over us. You can't tell us what to do. Fuck off. Which I think is a fairly valid point. We'll see how it plays out in the courts.
So this is causing problems in the UK with American content that's provided in this country, or...
Yeah. I mean, there are techniques. I mean, some like big social media companies have already found ways of censoring in a geofenced way.
Yeah.
Like they'll make content not available in the UK that is available in the US, for example.
Yeah.
And maybe if we're going to give the MPs the benefit of the doubt when they were drafting this law, and I'm loath to do so because I don't think they knew what the fuck they were doing.
Did this all come out of Sunak?
Oh yeah, it was a Tory thing originally. You remember I used to bang on about Nadine Dorries and all that.
Dorries is the architect.
She was, no, this is not a party political thing. I mean, both parties, but then it got finished off under Labour, but it doesn't matter. So there's that thing, and then there's the point which I think will come up back to Trump again and his sort of tendency to get petulant.
Can I just ask, what's Farage's policy on all this?
I haven't heard him say anything, but he'll be opportunistic on it, like he is on everything else.
He'll say, we'll sweep away all of that, and you can have all the freedoms you want down at Wetherspoons.
Yeah. He's just a classic populist. Yeah. He just listens to what people are annoyed about and goes, yeah, I'll ban that. And then everyone goes, all right, I'll vote for you then. Anyway, don't get me started. But Trump did a truth. And actually, it wasn't about this. It was about, he didn't directly address anything, but he seemed to be addressing the EU thing called the Digital Services Act, I think.
Yeah.
But that's got similar stuff. Basically, so it's got up to Trump where Americans have got annoyed about UK or Europe trying to impose their legal or regulatory will on the internet such that it affects American sites.
Yes.
And so it's an interesting thing, basically, when it comes to jurisdiction, because if you're trying to police the internet, then the internet is an intrinsically global thing. It's not bounded by national boundaries.
In my NVIDIA story, because this is relevant to my NVIDIA story, because this whole idea that you can't punish US tech companies is very relevant to the idea of the sovereign cloud. You know, this obsession that Europe has that we need to have, you know,
keep the data
in clouds that are provided by European companies is the kind of direction of travel, basically. But I liked his latest rant on Truth Social. There's loads of capital letters randomly.
He loves a bit of that.
As the President of the United States, I will stand up to countries that attack our incredible American tech companies.
That's the one I linked to. That's the one in my story as well. Keep reading.
Digital, and he wrote earlier this week, digital taxes, loads of capitals here, by the way, digital taxes, digital services legislation, and digital markets regulations are all designed to harm or discriminate against American technology. I didn't go on, but
well, they also outrageously give complete pass to China's largest tech companies. This must end, and then he's got block capitals. This must end, and then now in block capitals with this truth in block capitals. I put all countries with digital taxes.
Does he say that a lot, with this truth?
Yeah, because it's called a truth, because his website's called Truth.
I know, but I didn't know he was actually bunging that into
It's just silly stuff. And then he capitalised himself at the end. I mean, the thing about some egomaniacs, I almost give them credit when they lean into their egomania. And he does that. He's not pretending that he's anything other than this complete self-regarding alpha type.
I find the way people are dealing with him really quite worrying, though, at the moment.
Too deferential.
Yeah, and also it seems to be becoming... it's filtering down to a worrying level as well. There's a guy called Patrick Moorhead who's a very prominent chips. Right.
Well, I used to know him.
Okay.
Because he used to be at AMD when I was covering.
So I think I'm linked to him on LinkedIn, and I might have liaised with him a bit on emails in the past. But he obviously really knows his stuff on the chip side of things.
He was a senior exec at AMD 20 years ago.
Yeah. So he knows more about chips than most people who are sort of in the analyst world, and he's been weighing in on Intel and everything, and he's very widely followed, by the way. He's probably
he's done well as an analyst. Fair play to him.
But he put this tweet out about, this was in advance of Lip Bhutan's meeting with Trump, like my advice to Lip Bhutan during this meeting, and some of the points in it were things like wear a nice suit, always make sure.
Well, remember Zelensky got told off for not wearing a suit.
Compliment Trump on this, and then some of the comments on it were things like tell him that you're changing the name of 14A, that's their process node.
Right.
To Trumpium, like gallium, and we're going to call it Trumpium. I mean, I just find this really worrying.
Loads of other podcasts and stuff I've written, like on The Spectator, is basically, actually, Trump is really predictable. All you got to do is be sycophantic.
It's a frightening direction of travel.
Well, it's very monarchic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
It's like very monarchic. It's the exact word. It's exactly like what you'd have had to do back in the days of Henry VIII.
Kowtow, forelock tug.
Yeah. Make sure you're really nice to him and tell him he looks great, and he doesn't look like he's got gout and he's a big fat bastard, and maybe you'll get to keep your estate
against fat bastards
or your monastery.
Well, no, you were talking about Henry VIII. I know.
It's more people who cut wives off the heads off their,
I know.
Their wives.
It's very strange. It is very strange. So that happened, and I'm going to round it off because I think we've done a couple of hours.
Yeah.
And despite our little visit, I could do another one. It's always when the floodgates open, isn't it? The story I wrote this morning, which is relevant because it's also going to affect UK relations with America. I sort of channelized the FT, but the FT got hold of something that was apparently published, although I couldn't find it on their website, by an organisation called I can't find it. Anyway, there's an organisation, Investigatory Powers Tribunal, which is basically one of those places where you can go and moan about getting spied on.
Right.
And normally nothing will happen, but presumably Apple's moaned, and when Apple moans, it's got a bit more force than if you or I moan.
Not as much as it would have had 5 years ago if Apple had moaned.
Why is that?
share price? No. Where is it at the moment?
Oh, I think it's doing right. I think it's doing just fine.
Is it?
Apple's share price. Pierre will know.
Oh, so today it's a bit of a pullback from everyone except Apple, who's holding on. I don't know what's going on with them.
Actually, it's probably massively up in 5 years.
I think Apple's doing just fine.
The past week, the past month, they've been going a bit on a tear.
Are you dead excited about the iPhone 17, Pierre? You going to get one?
No, I'm skipping to the 18th.
What's good about the 17?
Well, they're all just tiny incremental improvements.
No, this year they're releasing a new model called the Air, apparently, which is a thinner.
Oh, they've done that with laptops. Rubbish, doesn't work.
Well, you have a MacBook Air.
Yeah, that's true. That's
right, now shut up then. So let me round this off because we're running out of time. I need a slash.
Let's go.
Right. So anyway, I couldn't find the source, but the FT got a look at it, so I was channelizing the FT. And basically, the long and short of it is, two things came from this filing, from this investigatory powers tribunal. One is, so the story, just a quick recap on the story, is back earlier on this year, it was found out that the UK had hassled Apple and said, Apple, you've got to give us access to your end-to-end encrypted personal cloud stuff so that we can spy on the fuckers that are spy on the data of the people on your cloud. Presumably they had some baddies in mind.
Right.
I mean, even then I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. And Apple went fuck off. And then eventually the US got involved and went, what the fuck's going on here? You can't just tell one of our companies to break their encryption. What are you playing at? And then it looked like the UK went, oh shit, yeah, sorry, and they backed down. But this story revealed two things. One, which was the original story was that they were just trying to get into one little bit of Apple's iCloud stuff. But this story alleges that they were trying to get into all of iCloud. So basically the UK was trying to say, we want to be able to hack into all of the iCloud, private personal iCloud data of anyone who uses Apple in the whole world, which is an incredible overreach.
Yeah.
And then the second allegation in it is that even after a couple of weeks ago, we got told off by Americans and we just went, oh yeah, sorry, we won't do that now. Apparently they haven't actually followed through on that promise. So they really can get in trouble with Trump and Tulsi Gabbard, and you can imagine what will happen there. So, I mean, it's just, I don't really have that much more to say about it other than, firstly, I just think it's appalling. I mean, I suppose I'll read my final paragraph, which summarises my feelings about the thing more broadly, leaving aside the geopolitical relationship stuff. I said, ultimately, we should be grateful to the UK government and spooks for their shambolic attempts to violate the online space. So clumsy and inconceived have their efforts been that they create the perfect platform to set international legal precedent from their likely failure. People are entitled to some degree of protection from the predations of the state, and end-to-end encryption is a key enabler of this. We can't, therefore, allow it to be abused in the name of mass surveillance. So that's the broader point I want to make, and why I'm pleased that the UK is being so clumsy at it. Because, obviously, I mean, you two are both big Apple users. I don't know, Pierre, I bet you use iCloud a fair bit, don't you?
I have like 2 terabytes.
Right,
it's unavoidable.
No, sorry, no, I have way less.
Well, it's unavoidable. I'm sure Apple forces you into it.
I have 500.
But presumably it also assures you that the shit that's on iCloud is secure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want the UK government trolling through it with some clumsy AI bot looking for some evidence of thought crime.
It's the same that you will have with Google when you take photos and then you get an invoice going, £1.50 this month for... You know, needed a bit more.
Or we'll wipe out all your photos.
It's £5 a month.
We'll wipe out all your memories.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. We should wrap it up there. That's fun.
Yeah.
We're not going to do one next week, everyone, because we're going to be off in Finland, like we said. And then we've got a guest for a few weeks after. My spreadsheet's looking quite full into September. I know, it's funny. I mean, I love having guests, but it's quite fun when it's just us talking shit, isn't it?
Yeah.
So hopefully you audience have enjoyed that as well. And so make sure you join us in 2 weeks.